Morning. We'll call the Wednesday, February 28th, 2024 Placer County Board of Supervisors meeting office meeting for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency to order. And our first item, Solvi, could you read the information regarding public participation?
Will do. After Chair Broadway opens an item up for public comment, those joining us by Zoom webinar can signal they wish to speak by clicking the raise hand button located in the middle bottom of the Zoom webinar window. If you're joining over the phone, you can press *9. pctpa staff will call out individuals one by one who have indicated they wish to speak. If you're experiencing technical difficulties and are unable to provide public comment during this meeting, please email your comments to me, Solvi Sable, at ssable@pctpa.net. Thank you. Chair Broadway, would you like to choose someone for flag salute?
You know what? I will lead us in the salute today.
Okay.
Please rise for the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The voice back there out of alignment. Make sure you heard me. Sophie, could we get a roll call, please?
Broadway.
Here.
Burris.
Here.
Cortez.
Here.
Dowden Calvillo.
Present.
Holmes.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Wilkins.
Present.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sophie. And I will note, because we do have a member of the board who is remote today, we will be taking roll call votes. All right, with that, our next item is agenda review. Are there any adjustments to today's agenda?
No adjustments, Chair.
No adjustments. Wonderful. Next item on our agenda is AB 2449. And I believe, Matt, you're going to review that?
Basically everybody's participating here in person with the exception of Director Burris, who's been noticed. So we're good to go. There's no action needed for AB 244.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matt. Next item on our agenda is approval of our minutes from the January 24th, 2024 meeting. The minutes were distributed with our packet and posted online. Are there any adjustments needed for the minutes?
I have none.
If there are no adjustments needed for the minutes, could I get a motion?
I move approval.
A second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for the January 24th, 2024 meeting. Any further discussion? There being none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Cortez.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Excellent. Thank you. Our next agenda item is item F, that is public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items not on our agenda today. If anyone wishes to address the board on an item not on our agenda, please limit your comments to 3 minutes and you can approach the podium. Do we have anyone here in chambers who wishes to address the board today on an item not on our agenda? There being no one in chambers, do we have anyone online? Solely?
No. Oh, my apologies. Peter Eklund, you're free to speak. Peter, you're free to speak. I'm not hearing.
You're not hearing
Yeah,
him?
no,
We're not saying anything.
we're not. No.
All right.
Sorry.
Eklund, unfortunately,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, my name is Peter Eklund. I attended the first meeting of the outreach for the SRTP and the sales tax measure at the Susan Jones area. And I just want to acknowledge that it was well attended. There were some good questions asked and Matt gave a good presentation. So I just want to acknowledge that.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Eklund. All right, do we have anyone else online that wishes to comment on public comment? There being none, wonderful. We'll move to the next item, which is item G. That is our consent calendar. Our consent calendar has 3 items. These are items that are routine and non-controversial and can be acted upon in one action. Is there any item on today's consent calendar that the board wishes to pull for review?
I have none.
All right, is there anyone from the public that wishes to pull an item from the consent calendar? There's no one in chambers, anyone online?
No, Chair.
Wonderful, I'll bring it back to the board. for-
Move approval.
Second. Okay.
I'll second.
Wonderful, we have a motion and a second to approve today's consent calendar item for the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. Any further discussion? There being none, so we get a roll call vote, please.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Cortez,
Aye.
Dowden Calfeo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next item is item H, that is our consent calendar for the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. We have one item today. Does anyone wish to pull that item for review?
Not I.
Is there anyone from the public that wishes for this item to be pulled? No one in chambers, anyone online? We'll bring it back to the board for,
Move approval.
wonderful, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Cortez,
Aye.
Dowden Calfeo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is our public hearing for the Placer County Housing Element Rezone Project, and we're going to determine a consistency determination. I believe David Melko is going to.
Yes.
Correct. So getting a little feedback here.
Yeah, what's the deal?
Loud. Well,
Yeah.
let's try again. Okay. Okay, so today's, we're asking the Airport Commission to conduct a public hearing regarding consistency of Placer County's housing element rezone project with the Placer County Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. And our recommendation is that the commission find the proposed housing element rezone project consistent, subject to recommended conditions. There's a brief PowerPoint presentation that summarizes the staff report. So just as a reminder for the public, that the role of the Airport Land Use Commission is to adopt and maintain an airport land use compatibility plan. And we're supposed to review plans, zoning regulations, land use plans near airports. The process has slightly changed since the adoption of the 2021 Airport Land Use Compatibility Plans, because for the first time in the history of this organization, the general plans for Placer County, the city of Lincoln, and the city of Auburn have all been determined to be consistent with the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. And the zoning ordinances for all those jurisdictions were also updated and determined to be consistent by this body. So with that, going forward in the future, the only types of projects that we will see will be projects that are considered mandatory under state law, which are like rezoning, zoning ordinance amendments, general plan, and community plan amendments. The jurisdiction staff at each of your planning departments will conduct the reviews that we used to see, conditional use permits, tentative maps, subdivision reviews, those sort of things. And they will use the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan because that was part of the actions that were taken by your respective bodies back then. So under the plan and under state law, there are 3 potential determinations that can be made. You can find it consistent with the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. You can find it consistent subject conditions, or you can find it inconsistent based on specific conflicts. And so today's project that's before us is, so Placer County is requesting a consistency determination of their housing element rezone project. And I believe there was a letter provided by the Placer County planning director that was distributed to all of you. So you have that as background. And the housing element rezone project includes 4 entitlements that need to be approved by ultimately the Placer County Board of Supervisors. And that will include a general plan amendment, a housing element amendment, updates to Chapter 17, which is the zoning ordinance of Placer County Code, and an action to potentially rezone up to 72 properties. So why is the housing element rezone project, why is there this project? So the county's housing element basically was adopted in May 2021, and the housing element includes a response to the regional housing needs allocation requirement. Sometimes people understand it by the acronym RHNA. And the rezone project would require rezoning up to 72 properties in the unincorporated area to provide for multifamily development in order also for the county to achieve its RHNA allocation. And the rezoning project here will create a new zoning district called Residential Multifamily 30 or RM 30. So when we look at this particular project, it's important for the public in particular to know that the Airport Land Use Commission is not the land use authority. So our role here is to determine consistency of the project with the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. And that's to do so, we look at 4 factors: noise, safety, airspace protection, and overflight compatibility. And the consistency determination is to make sure, one, that any proposed development is safe. So when people, because you're involving people, and so you want to make sure that the people on the ground are safe with respect to potential aircraft accident, as well as for noise considerations. And likewise, there's a balance here. You want to make sure, because airports are economic development engines, you want to make sure that the airport itself is also protected with respect to surrounding development. So there's kind of a back and forth with that. So of the 72 sites, when we take a first look at it, none of the rezone sites are proposed within the vicinity of the Lincoln Regional Airport or the Blue Canyon Airport. And as we drill down, there are 13 rezone sites within the Auburn Airport influence area. And that's the subject of what you all would look at in making a determination of consistency. So we go from 72 to 13. And of those sites, all of the sites are either in zones, compatibility zone C2 and D. One site, 43, is split between zone C1 and C2, and that becomes kind of important. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So this map, it's kind of unfortunate, but the numbers on the map basically reflect the location of the sites or close proximity. Site 43 is the site that is split between zone C2 and C1. All the other sites are in the C2 or D zones. So just for a refresher here, before I get into the staff review, site residential that's located, whether it's single family or multifamily, in compatibility zone C2 is permitted. However, residential in those sites are required to have an overflight notification, a buyer awareness measure, or a tenant awareness measure, depending upon the type of property, because you're closer into the airport and you may be, it's been determined that it's best for those particular residents to know that there's an airport, there may be noise, there may be aircraft safety issues, and there may be overflight. For sites that are located in a compatibility zone D, there are no restrictions on residential development. And in compatibility zone C1, multifamily is not allowed under the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan. So with respect to noise, and there's a noise map within the staff report, all the sites are outside of the 60 decibel noise contour. Under the state environmental review, if you're outside the 60 decibel noise contour, then noise is not necessarily an impact. Although if you have significant outdoor activities, some people still may be affected. But generally, it's not considered an impact if you're outside the 60 decibel noise contour. With respect to safety, as I mentioned, all the sites are allow for multifamily except for site 43. And site 43 is split between C1 and C2, and approximately 2/3 of the site is located within compatibility zone C2, and 1/3 is within compatibility zone C1. So in our opinion, in working with our consultant, if that particular site goes forward as a multifamily site, there will need to be restrictions, and there's a condition here recommended that when a developer comes forward, whether it's the public agency or a private developer, the site design is going to have to take into account that the multifamily component will only be able to be located on the site that's within portion of the site that's within C2. So it's going to become a design consideration. For airspace review, none of the multifamily housing is anticipated to reach 150 feet. That's the threshold within the C2 zone. It's higher in the D zone. And so 150 feet is approximately 12 stories. So it's very unlikely that, based under the county zoning code and land use code, that anything will ever happen like that. And so if there was a particular project that was proposed to reach 150 feet, then the county would have to have the applicant go through an FAA airspace review. And then for overflight, as I noted, compatibility zone C1 and C2 require recorded overflight notification, and that would need to be a condition of approval. There are some other considerations here. So in the notice of preparation that went out by the county staff, they noted that additional sites could be added later. And I think that was partly as a way to provide for flexibility, because when you rezone properties, it's not an easy public debate. There's a lot of controversy. I've been involved with it in prior lives. And so if there are additional sites proposed as the county continues to go through the process, if those sites are located within airport influence area, then the county staff will need to come back again. So just putting that out there. If those sites are located within any of the compatibility zones, such as zones A, B1, B2, or C1, multifamily would be inconsistent unless the particular sites are located within what's called Auburn's infill green zone. And that's a hatched area on the map that I previously shown. And that particular area allows a max density to 20 units per acre. So they would not be able to do 30 units per acre. I will note, though, that with that particular policy for the Auburn infill green zone, it does require a special conditions approval by this commission. It cannot be done by staff. And so as part of that, if an applicant or the county came forward and wanted to do something greater than 20 units per acre, this body here would need to approve a special conditions exception for that particular project. And the way the policy is written, it's similar to how your jurisdictions approve variances. It's a one-time thing applicable only to that particular spot and cannot be used as a justification for other particular areas. But there are no proposals at this point in time on that. So summing up here, we're recommending that you find the housing element rezone project consistent with the airport land use compatibility plan, subject to the following conditions, so that residential projects in zones C1 and C2 will require recorded overflight notification. And that portion of site 43 that falls within Zone C1 would have to have a lower density residential use because in Zone C1, you can do single family or an alternative use such as parking, open space, or public space, depending upon the design plan. Multifamily housing would not be allowed in that portion of the site that falls within C1. And then lastly, there will be a letter that will go to the county summarizing the consistency determination in the ALUC action here. So that will be part of the record that will go to the Board of Supervisors. Your next steps, conduct a public hearing, make a consistency determination. I will note that the county staff planner is here in case if there's any questions of the county staff with regard to the housing element rezone project. And then there's also City of Auburn staff here, and they will want to speak to this particular item as it relates to the airport.
Mr. Chairman, I have a procedural question, if I may.
Absolutely.
So with all due respect, I'm wondering if there was any direct coordination with city staff on this item between us or.
So when the county released the notice of preparation, we responded with comments in an email, and city staff were CC'd on that. And Jonathan had reached out to me in terms of whether or not we would be supportive of the city's action with respect to the rezone element project process, because the city staff had a number of questions. At the time, I had indicated that it would be premature to take a position because we hadn't yet really gone through the rezone review process. We hadn't received yet from the county a request to go through this whole process. And then ultimately, as I looked at the sites, the 13 sites, there, from a planning perspective, there were no particular issues because all the sites allow for multifamily except the one parcel that's split by C2 and C1. So there was some copying, and initial communication,
But there wasn't any, after the staff report and recommendations was developed, did you reach out to city staff just to? I appreciate, we got our packet. We always get our packet way in advance. Staff are phenomenal about that. I am not so great about picking it up and looking through it right away, as I'm sure many of us are in that same boat because we've got so many other packets to look at. I find myself in sort of a predicament here with the city in that it appears that we have some significant concerns, but there hasn't been enough time for staff to digest the report that's before us. We have this public hearing process right now. I don't know if we're able to continue this because of the RENA requirements. Maybe staff, can you speak to that? Is there an opportunity to continue the public hearing to our next meeting? I don't think we can, but I'd like to ask that. And thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity, your indulgence on this.
well, before Callie jumps in, so if we were to extend our public hearing, ultimately, the County Board of Supervisors cannot act until the Airport Land Use Commission makes a determination. So we fit within their schedule.
Sure.
Okay, so.
Thank you. My name is Callie Kettinger Cecil, Senior Planner with the Planning Services Division. If this item were to be continued, I would need to know when it would be continued to. We do have a deadline for this program, May 15th. So we are making progress toward that deadline. If this item were to be continued and there was another hearing prior to then, we could certainly, come back and provide clarification to any answers or concerns that you may have.
So are you saying that there is an opportunity to then continue the public hearing without disrupting the county's process? I wouldn't want to.
I'm not sure because I don't know when it would be.
When our
continued.
meeting, okay, so, and we just meet once a month, so our next meeting date is not until, Sylvie, when is our next? March 22nd. Would that be too late?
It wouldn't be too late, because as I mentioned, we are going, or our deadline is in May. We are also going to the Planning Commission in April. The only thing I would caveat is that we are in the public review period for the draft environmental impact report. So if there's anything that occurred today that, someone wanted to comment on, I would want to make sure that that comment is heard and that we're able to respond to that in the final EIR. So that's the only thing that if you were going to continue it later, I would just see if perhaps we could engage in some sort of public comment, because then if those comments could be included in the final EIR, I think that that would be a good thing.
Okay.
I just would like to be able to ensure that our staff have an opportunity to thoroughly review this. The city of Auburn has been on the record with regards to concerns for high density housing anywhere near the airport. And so I just feel like, I know there's a couple conditions here that would try to alleviate some of the safety issues, but there are noise issues and so forth. And I really think that in order to ensure that we have the most and the best information possible, I'd really like our staff to be able to have that chance to take a look at this. If it wouldn't disrupt the process, I'd like to maybe perhaps continue the public hearing.
I guess, Alice, my question would be, is that necessary in order for your team to engage, for us to delay this process? There are other steps that provide for the opportunity for your team to review that, for them to provide input to it, including it going to both the planning commission and
Yes.
to the county. So my recommendation would be, in order to keep the process moving forward, having been through, I think we all have been, where these delays start to snowball, because we have that opportunity. I would say if you would have and your team, if the city would not have an opportunity to provide feedback and seek adjustment, because I believe, if I understand you correctly, and if I don't, please correct me, you would look to potentially limit that, which wouldn't require any further action from this body
Right.
if that was modified and reduced, as opposed to an increase would have to come back to us. So really, our approval would simply move this to a point where the planning commission and then the board of supervisors could review it, but still having the option for you to speak and make modifications. So
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, so certainly the city of Auburn has an opportunity to participate, and we have been participating in this process, but we, as the airport land use, we're taking a look at this as the airport land use commission, right, for pctpa. So I just feel like it would be appropriate for us to hear information from the city with regards to the concerns. I'm going to put my city on the staff here, and they're on the spot. And, I know that they haven't had a chance to really take a look at all of this, but do you feel like you're able to provide adequate testimony that will inform this body?
Jonathan Wright, Community and Economic Development Director, City of Auburn. Unfortunately, this was something that was put on my schedule. I was not made aware of this hearing today until about 20 minutes before I'm supposed to be here. So I have not had a chance to review the materials. I am privileged to the information that was put out by the county. And so we've already worked to respond to the county in regards to those. We've already had some conversations with county staff. I'm prepared to speak to our position today, which is the same as it has been. And so, but if I had more time to adequately prepare, I'd feel better about providing the information and not just shooting from the hip, but it's, sometimes these things happen this way. So
Perhaps a compromise, Mr. Chairman, is we could recess the public hearing until the end of the meeting so that staff can have a chance to maybe go in the back and take a look at it. And then just we can take action on it at the end of the meeting, so we can go through, because we've got quite a few other items on the agenda today. Would that be sufficient, or would that work? I mean, so it would just be delaying for maybe an hour.
Yeah, I'm going to look to legal counsel to ensure that that's not a problem. Through agenda modification, we can always do that. But Deanne, could you clarify, would there be any issue?
Yeah, Deanne Gill, General Counsel, it's permissible for you to, recess the public hearing and come back at this meeting. You could also, continue it to a date certain with the notice that's been published. And you not have to renotice it, but continue it to the date certain. So you have that flexibility and ability to pause, recess, and continue.
Wonderful. Right. Well, what I would prefer to do is provide the City of Auburn staff with some time while we move through the other items in the agenda. So to move this later in our agenda, and then hopefully we can move this item forward rather than delaying it. So subject to the board supporting that, I'm going to start to my left because Jim caught my eye first. Yep. So,
I don't see the purpose of this because it's still going to end up with a consistency determination that's reflected in our staff report. So any issues that the city has with the county has to come forward to the Board of Supervisors, the Planning Commission, and Kelly, are we having another workshop on this?
We do not have another workshop scheduled at this point. The next hearing that we are targeting is the Planning Commission meeting in April. I would note that this information has been available for quite a long time, even prior to today's hearing.
Yes.
The consistency determination does discuss all 72 sites. That has not changed since the notice of preparation was released in November. So this information has absolutely been out there. Staff has been available to provide clarification or answer questions, and staff has been available to the City of Auburn for those efforts.
If I might just say, I appreciate that. And I will, I'll fall on the sword on this one. I didn't talk to my staff. I meant to get with them earlier. I just looked at the material yesterday and realized I got to get to it. And then I had another issue come up with family matters. So I will take responsibility for that. But I do feel that what the city may have was to say may impact this body's voting on its determination of compatibility. And so just asking for an hour or two it would just be a point of privilege. Certainly respect the decision of my colleagues, but I just need to make the ask and if it, so.
And Supervisor Holmes, well, I think from the standpoint of moving this item out to a future date, I think you and I are probably similar in our concerns, but would you have an objection to moving it later in our agenda today to provide them with a few minutes to prepare their comment?
If that's the will of the board.
Okay, great. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm fine with moving this to the end of our agenda. I have a question for David. So my understanding of these, the staff work on the compatibility determination is effectively taking, I think there's a map for all these airports that show flight safety zones. And that was predetermined as part of the airport land use compatibility document that was put together a number of years ago. And then what you did is basically take that adopted map that shows those flight safety zones and overlay that with the proposed housing development sites to
Correct.
see what development sites fall in what safety zone.
Correct.
So it's very much a technical exercise that staff has been through, and that's the basis for the staff report we've seen so far.
Correct. And I will note, we've also, as part of our process here, we go through a pctpa's technical advisory committee. And all of the jurisdictions, including the City of Auburn staff, sit on that. So this was previewed 2+ weeks ago in terms of what we were recommending. And there were no objections raised at that particular meeting by any of the staff. So, but it is a technical exercise.
Perfect. Well, subject to the board being in agreement to move this item further down in our agenda and closing this for the time being, I would like to do that. We're not going to open it for public comment if we move this later.
What you're saying. I
you'll-
thought I'd stand up and
Yeah.
express standing up.
Yeah, and you'll have the opportunity then. I will look to the board
The heck with the public.
we're going to just move this later in the agenda. It will be reviewed today. So it's not going to be moved off calendar before you have an opportunity. So any objection from the board to move this item? Okay, so we are going to, thank you. We are going to move this item. We're going to move item I after item Q in our agenda, and we will reopen the public comment at that time.
Thank you, colleagues. I truly appreciate that, and I will do better next time to ensure that we coordinate.
All right, great, thank you. We will move now to item J.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mike Costa. I'm happy to be here today and present this item. As some of you are already aware, as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency for Placer County, pctpa is responsible for administering the Transportation Development Act, or TDA for short. Under the TDA regulations, there are three primary sources of funding that our region receives: local transportation funds, or LTF, state transit assistance funds, or STA, and state of good repair funds, or SGR funds. Of those three funds, the local transportation funds, which are primarily intended for transit, can be used for other purposes such as local street and road maintenance. The other two sources of funds are only available for transit uses. So because of the local transportation funds being available for other purposes, on an annual basis, pctpa must conduct an unmet transit needs assessment process per TDA regulations and make a finding that there are no unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet prior to those LTF funds being distributed for other purposes outside of transit. So that's why we're here today. So what is unmet transit needs? This board actually adopted the criteria for both the definition of unmet transit needs and the reasonable to meet criteria back in February of 2022. And for unmet transit needs, in summary, those are needs for services that do not exist today in any sort of capacity, or therefore needs for services that are making sure that transit is in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA regulations. So that's the first part of determining what an unmet transit needs is. The second part, which is the reasonable to meet criteria, essentially summarizes that a transit service, in order for us to run it, has to be anticipated to meet our fare box requirements, which is established by this board. Also, it has to be a service that can be paid for with existing funding and not something that requires additional funding that's not reasonable to assume, as well as something that's strongly supported by the community and included in our short-range transit plan and long-range regional transportation plan. So that's the second part of the criteria that we have to look at if we determine there is an unmet transit need. So this process, again, typically kickstarts in the fall timeframe and lasts until the early part of the new year, right when we start, and you'll have Corey present this at a later time in this agenda, start discussing the next fiscal year apportionment of local transportation funds. For this year, we started our process in September. We did have a survey that was made available, and this outreach effort was a little more robust this year because actually with unmet transit needs, we were doing a concurrent comprehensive operational analysis of our transit systems here in the South Placer region. So the surveys and the outreach was more robust with staff. We were in every community. We conducted presentations to your respective governing authorities or boards and councils. And then we analyzed all the comments that we received, all 230 of them. And then we, of course, presented those findings to our technical working groups and our transit operators working groups and our Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, or SSTAC. And all of that was done over the last 5 months. And we're bringing our final report and findings to you today. So again, as I mentioned, we did provide the survey that was also available in Spanish, and Tagalog was available upon request. We did a robust outreach and we conducted a public hearing with this body back in October of last year to solicit potential unmet transit needs comments, and that was concurrent with our COA outreach. So as I mentioned, we did receive 230 comments. Last year, we were roughly around 130, so we did get more participation and comments from the public. Of those 230, 27 were identified as unmet transit needs. However, after looking at the reasonable to meet criteria, they did not raise to that level of reasonable to meet. So what we heard as common themes for this process, and this is not a surprise, we've heard this in previous years, is better coordination, integration, and connection of services between Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville, which are provided by two different transit operators, Roseville Transit and Placer County Transit, which we are looking at in our comprehensive operational analysis right now. More frequent service to Sacramento and to connecting areas like the airport, also looking at services to the Bay Area that cannot be provided by our current Capital Corridor trains. Sunday service, which is only currently provided by the city of Roseville. So Placer County Transit does not provide any Sunday service. So that was something that was identified. And then looking at, of course, areas of our region that are unincorporated that are not served by transit right now, Forest Hill and Sheridan. And then looking at even some connections to Nevada County, as well as Granite Bay areas, and then connections, more of them between the South Placer region and the Tahoe Truckee region. So those are all themes that we've heard before. I can say that just because these comments and these potential unmet needs did not make the reasonable to meet criteria, again, I want to emphasize we are, as staff, with our partners and our transit operators and stakeholders, looking at these comments as part of our comprehensive operational analysis to see how we can continue to still improve transit services and make some of these needs addressed in our future service planning efforts. And I will also say that with the upcoming South Placer Transit Express service, or Rapid Link as it's being referred to, which should come online sometime in early 2025, that service may alleviate some of these needs as well. And that's the connection service between Lincoln, Rockland, Roseville, and Roseville, and then the Watt I-80 light rail station on a 30-minute frequency during the work week, Monday through Friday. So we're hoping, again, some of our service planning efforts in combination with some of our future anticipated services will potentially address some of these unmet transit needs that we're hearing today. So with that, staff is recommending to the board two findings today. One, that there are no unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet in the coming fiscal year or the next fiscal year 24-25, as well as that this board finds the report that's included in your attached agenda as complete and final. The TOG and SS TAC, which is our Transit Operators Working Group and Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, reviewed all of staff's analysis as well as the report and concurred with staff's findings. And then your respective technical advisory committee members also reviewed this and concurred with the findings. So I am available for questions, but with that, staff is recommending the proposed findings. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Do we have any questions from the board for Mike? All right. No questions from the board. Thank you. I'll open it up to the public. Do we have anyone in chambers from the public that wishes to comment on this item? There being none, do we have anyone online who wishes to comment on this item?
We do.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Peter Eklund, you're free to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Peter Eklund. I'm a member of the advisory committee for this project, and I strongly recommend approval for it. And I think it is important, though, to understand what this process is all about, because there's other processes going on at exactly the same time. And I think that unmet transit needs is really a misnomer. It doesn't mean that there aren't any unmet transit needs in the community, because what's looked at is just one trip for each, from origin to destination. But it is important because, in a sense, the process has two thresholds. There's a lower threshold. You have to provide a certain level of a minimum level of service. You can't just provide nothing. And every city meets that threshold. That's really not the problem. And then there's a high threshold, and the threshold is actually similar to a camel going through the eye of a needle. It's very difficult to meet, which is okay too. I mean, I've agreed, I've concurred with everything. I accept all the thresholds and everything else. My only thought is, with these other processes going on, it's worthwhile for the board and everybody else to recognize that there are unmet transit needs, and somehow maybe some of the information that comes up from the public is transferred over to these plans, and that the advisory committee participates in what is transferred. Because what happens, it's just a dead end. Nothing is ever transferred. And so the short-range transit people have to dig into it and kind of figure out what is worthwhile for pursuing again. So it's a legitimate process, but it does have its problems. The staff goes through incredible work to put this thing together, and I admire them for that. And as I say, I've concurred with it, and it's a necessary thing, but I just like to see a little more. Right now, there's a stone wall between this process and other processes going on, which is particularly unfortunate because they're going on at the same time. And over time, I just like to see a little bit more semi-permeable membrane, if you will, for ideas. And I'm really, each year I'm surprised the number of people who participate. I think it's amazing. I mean, 230 people sit down and write a comment on one particular trip. Anyway, so the bottom line is it has to be done. It was done. I concur with everything that was done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eklund, and thank you for your service on the committee as well. We appreciate your comments. Do we have anyone else from the public who wishes to comment on this item?
We do. Tink Miller, you're free to speak.
Hi. Uh-oh. Don't know what to do about that echo. Are you hearing the echo?
A little bit, Tink, but we can hear you.
Okay. I'm trying a different computer today. I also was on the committee that worked on this. And as Peter said, I do endorse it. I wanted to point out a couple of things. We are part of the Aging and Disability Resource Connection for Placer County, which is a partnership with Agency on Aging, Seniors First, Placer County Health and Human Services, the Del Oro Caregivers Program, and Placer 211. And then we have other organizations on an advisory committee. So our focus is serving seniors and people with disabilities across the county. And part of that activity involves updating a plan for needs that people have. And of course, transportation is always one of the top needs that they identify. And they have specifically pointed out that it's key to meeting their critical needs, to access food, healthcare services, and community activities that prevent isolation. Isolation is a critical factor in depression and other mental health disabilities. So that's very urgent need among seniors. I would like to just highlight a couple things in terms of the transit services. One, it's in the report, but streamlining connectivity of all the services across jurisdictional lines and using innovative pilot programs and new transit resources that may be emerging, like Auburn Transit's on-demand program. It's extremely popular among seniors and people with disabilities. It's my understanding is it's being continued as a success. So we're very supportive of those kinds of pilot programs. My fear is that the current definition of needs reasonable to meet, I think prohibits looking at potential pilot projects that might take implementation over time and funding from maybe a couple different 2 or 3 years worth of funding to roll out. And the way the formula is written right now on reasonable to meet, I think it only looks at the exact year in which the report is being created, rather than being able to look forward and maybe funding part of it in 1 year and the rest of it in the next year. So I would encourage.
Okay, Tink, thank
Yes.
you very much. I need you to conclude your comments.
Yes, sir. And my only final point is that Placer County is designated as an age-friendly county. And I want to say that we want to ensure that the Western Placer CTSA is adequately funded to support and serve people with disabilities and our seniors, who rapidly are becoming 30% of the whole population. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for joining us today, Tink, and thank you for your comments. Do we have anyone else who wishes to comment on this item? Wonderful. I will bring it back to the board for discussion and action. Do we have any further discussion regarding this item?
I just would like to say that I appreciate the amount of work that went into this document and into the recommendations. Clearly, this is a very lengthy and complex process, so really do appreciate the analysis and the participation by all that on that advisory committee as well.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Comments were impressive. It was a long list.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you. All right, there are no further comments or feedback. Could I get an action, please?
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2407, making the following findings and recommendations regarding the annual unmet transit needs assessment pursuant to the Transportation Development Act. Number one, that there are no unmet transit needs for FY 23-24 that are reasonable to meet for implementation in 24-25. Number two, that the annual unmet transit needs assessment report for fiscal year 24-25 is accepted as complete.
Second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, can we get a roll call vote, please? Oh, we did. We already did. Yes, sir.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Cortez,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Joyner,
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Mike. All right, next item on our agenda is item K, the fiscal year 2024-25 preliminary TDA findings of appointment or apportionment, and fund estimates. And Corey, I believe, is presenting that.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members of the board. Corey Peterson, Senior Planner. The item before you is to approve the preliminary findings for the Transportation Development Act funds. And Mike gave a very good summary of what those three funds are. We have the Local Transportation Fund, the State of Good Repair, and the State Transit Assistance Funds. These funds come to you twice a year, once in February for the preliminary apportionments, and then again in August or September for the final apportionments. So I just wanted to do a quick overview of some of the historical revenue that we've received from each of the funds. So in looking at the LTF for the last 10 years, Placer County overall has been on a pretty steady increase in the amount of sales tax revenue that we've been receiving coming out of the recession and going into the early 2020s. We took a little bit of a dip in 2020 for the COVID pandemic, and then have been rising again. But the last about year or two, we've actually started to decline slightly in revenue as spending has slowed, statewide and nationwide in general. So as Placer County. So what does that look like for our outlook for 24-25? Our revenue is continuing, at least from what we've seen in the kind of the fund estimates for next fiscal year. It's continuing to stagnate and slightly decline for over the previous year. Like I mentioned, we peaked in fiscal year 21-22 after a slight pandemic decline and then increased, coming out of COVID. However, because we have a positive fund balance going into 24-25, we have a slightly higher apportionment than last year. And we're also, to be a little more conservative in our revenue estimates, we're assuming a 0% growth on the 24-25 LTF over the previous fiscal year. And that's mainly to just in case, we have lower than expected revenues, just as the economy is slowing, spending is slowing, and revenues are continuing to stagnate over previous fiscal years. Our projected carryover balance from the current fiscal year is around $775,000. So we're expecting for the West Slope a $32.2 million apportionment, of which about $29 million will be available to your local agencies. And that's about a 4% increase over the final LTF apportionment that was before this board last October for 23-24 fiscal year. This is just a map showing the apportionments for each of the agencies. Like I mentioned, each agency will be getting slightly more. at least in the preliminary estimates from the previous fiscal year. And then when we come back in August or September, we'll have final numbers for your jurisdictions on what each one will get. Now moving on to the state transit assistance funds. So this is funded by gas tax revenue. And overall, it's been, at least since the slight dips during the early years of COVID, it's been increasing steadily over the last couple of years. We are expecting a preliminary apportionment of about 4.3 million, of which about 3.8 will be apportioned by population formula, and then a small amount by fair revenue formula, and that funds goes to our 3 transit operators with Auburn, Placer County, and the city of Roseville. This is a little bit less than the final apportionment for 23-24, and then this will get trued up in August or September when the final comes around. And again, this is a map showing each of the apportionments for each of the cities. This goes to all of our jurisdictions, as well as a small cut for the Western Placer CTSA. And traditionally for the cities of Lincoln, Colfax, and Rockland, and the town of Loomis, most of the SD funds typically goes to Placer County, who provides contract transit services for these jurisdictions. And for the state of good repair, this has been on a steady incline for most of the last 4 or 5 fiscal years. We're expecting a preliminary apportionment of about 600,000, most of which is apportioned by population. The difference with the state of good repair, this only goes to the 3 transit operators for the only eligible claimants of these funds. So these will go directly to the city of Auburn, Placer County, and the city of Roseville. This is slightly higher than our last apportionment. And then again, showing a map of where the apportionments are going, the most going to Placer County, a little over 360,000, and down to Auburn, about $17,000. So the next steps, the final apportionments for 24-25 will come back to the board in either August or September. These revenue estimates typically get released around the beginning of August from the county auditor's office and from the state controller's office for STA and SGR. And our requested action from staff is to adopt the preliminary 24-25 apportionments. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Corey. Any questions from the board?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Apparently, the state of California has a pretty significant revenue shortfall. Do you, and you may not be able to answer this, but do you think that shortfall will have an effect on the funding for our transportation projects?
Well, I can take a stab at an answer for at least for this fund estimate, and then Matt might have some thoughts. The short answer is the shortfall that's happening at the state capitol is mostly related to general fund spending from the state, and so that would not affect the apportionments that are before you, because those are directly funded either through sales tax, which is generated in Placer County and comes back to Placer County, or it's generated from gas tax and sales and diesel fuel sales as well.
Okay.
So
that gives me comfort. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional questions from the board? No? No? All right, there being no questions from the board, I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone in chambers from the public that wishes to comment on this item? Oh, do we have anyone online that wishes to comment on this item?
We do.
Okay.
Peter Eklund, you're free to speak.
I have a comment on this. The LTF is the major funding available for transit. The graph on the growth of LTF is particularly important, and I think needs to be understood. It is doubled from 2013 to 2023. That amount has doubled. I did kind of a typical analysis for that would apply to Rockland and Lincoln. I assumed $10 million an annual amount may be available. It's probably a little bit less than that. And assume that in 2013 that represented 20% went to transit. So when you go forward with a doubling of the LTF, what happens is the LTF for transit is half, 10%. And what has happened then for road is the increase in road money goes from $4 million to $9 million. And so the obvious conclusion, there's a little bit there's some wiggle room in there for transit. And in looking at scenarios, it makes sense to consider a percentage increase in LTF. Okay, each 1% increase in LTF is worth about $100,000. Okay, so somewhere between, you're not going to go back to 20. You're starting at 10. You're at least going to go to 11. But at least look at some scenarios that are in the range of 2 to 3%. Let's say 3%. That's $300,000 that at least you would consider for transit improvements. And what has happened in the COA is incredible. Their first two scenarios don't go beyond 1% LTF, which basically means you can't do anything. And it means you have to cut service to even do those two scenarios. And the two scenarios they're looking at just do that. There are no improvements at all. And so it makes sense to, as I say, for each community to set a range on LTF of where it wants to go, figure out where they've been and look at your other priorities, but do it on the basis of an LTF, not on the percentage of existing costs. And it's a very straightforward argument. And both Roseville Transit and PCT Transit do the scenarios don't understand that at all. Roseville Transit, three scenarios are no increase in existing, 10%, once again, 10% of cost, not LTF. And the third one is no fixed transit, just dial-a-ride. For a legitimate process, there needs somewhere along the line, someone has to sort of make it possible for a reasonable planning process to occur in the COA. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Do we have anyone else online who wishes to comment on this item?
No.
Okay, does staff wish to comment on Mr. Eklund's concerns regarding the percentage of LTF?
I can make a brief comment. So in terms of the apportionment, once that goes out to the cities, PCTPA generally does not tell the cities what to spend it on, what percentage is spent on transit versus roads. I will say that the city of Roseville, Placer County, and the city of Auburn all spend a fairly significant percentage of their LTF on transit services already. So this money is not obviously exclusively used for transit, but there is a significant portion of it that is being used for transit currently.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And again, thank you, Mr. Eklund, for your comments. With that, I will bring it back to the board. Any comments, questions before we take action? There being none, can I get it?
I move staff recommendation.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Cortez,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo, Holmes,
Aye.
Joyner,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Sylvie. Next item on our agenda is item L, the Placer County-wide Active Transportation Plan Consulting Contract Award. And Corey, I believe you're presenting that as well.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning again, members of the board. So this item before you is to award contract for the Placer Countywide Active Transportation Plan. Just kind of as a background, we were awarded a Sustainable Communities Grant from Caltrans for around $420,000. This came in around the end of last year. With a match, we're looking at a total project cost of just under $480,000. This is an active transportation plan that 5 out of the 6 cities in the town of Loomis are participating in, as well as Placer County. City of Roseville is currently preparing their own ATP. They just got started a few months ago. We'll be coordinating very closely with their staff on the recommendations of each of our plans to ensure that they align where there's cross-jurisdictional projects. Really the purpose of this plan is to help incorporate a lot of the past planning efforts on active transportation, develop projects, and set our jurisdictions up for future funding. As we know, state and federal grants are becoming increasingly difficult to obtain. And so we want to make sure that our jurisdictions are as competitive as possible when they go out and seek funding for active transportation projects. This is the first cross-jurisdictional effort where we're having a countywide active transportation plan. So we're very excited to work with you guys, work with your staff on this plan. So in order to select a consultant team to prepare this work, we held a competitive request for proposals. This was done during December and January of 2024. We received 6 written proposals from the firms listed on the screen. The proposals were all scored by a panel of representatives, including myself, Mike Costa, as well as representatives from the city of Rockland and Placer County, who were generous in donating their time to review our proposals and conduct interviews with us. We shortlisted 3 firms, Alta, Kittleson, and WSP, to do interviews, which were held a couple weeks ago on February 14th. We unanimously recommended Kittleson for the contract award, presented this to our executive director, who concurred to move it to the board. And one of the reasons that we were unanimous in our decision was Kittleson prepared the Placer County 2018 bikeway plan for the unincorporated areas. They have a lot of knowledge of Placer County conditions and really kind of understood our rural suburban interface and how we're gonna need to be very tailored in our recommendations, where we're dealing with Rockland and Lincoln, who have are growing very fast, versus Colfax or the unincorporated areas, which are very rural and want to stay that way. So that was one of the reasons that we unanimously recommended them. So with that, the action requested is to authorize the executive director to negotiate and execute a contract with Kittleson to prepare the countywide active transportation plan, and the amount on the contract is not to exceed $370,000. Happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Corey, any questions from the board?
No.
No question. Okay, there being none, I'll open it up to the public for comment. Is there anyone in chambers from the public that wishes to comment on this item? There being none, do we have anyone online who wishes to comment?
We do.
Okay.
Peter
Yeah,
Eklund, you're
This is Peter Eklund again. Just a quick comment. I'm really glad to see that every one of the 6 firms that was that's responded is very good, very good. And I'm just glad to see that there's been an adequate outreach to competitive firms to bid on projects, because it means that it's going to be, it means that there's going to be a good results. And this does not always happen.
Great, thank you. All right, anyone else online wishes to comment on this item? No?
That's it.
All right, I will bring it back to the board. Any additional questions or comments? There being none, could I get an action on this item?
I'll move that we authorize the executive director to execute the contract with the selected consultant.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve. Any further comment? There being none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Cortez.
She's opted.
Oh, sorry. Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, our next item on the agenda today is M, that's the Capital Area Regional Tolling Authority. Matt, you going to present that today?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So as a reminder, there's this new thing called CARTA, the Capital Area Regional Tolling Authority. This is a 3-party JPA between the YOLO, TD, SACOG, and Caltrans. And this is a joint powers authority to start looking at tolling in the greater Sacramento region, beginning with really the I-80 Managed Lanes project in YOLO. And working with SACOG staff through the JPA, it was identified that pctpa and EDCTC could participate as non-voting members. And so the action before you today is to ask to basically appoint myself as the executive director as that non-voting member to CARTA. If we were going to decide into the future, we as PCTPA was going to get into the sort of tolling business and want to join CARTA because we were going to have a tolling project, we'd go through a process of officially joining, and we would then get 2 board seats on CARTA, which would be 2 members of our board. But seen as the fact that we're not anticipating getting into the tolling business or doing anything like that the next decade or so, Really, at this point, our role is to sort of, be somewhat of an advisor and a listener and to sort of sit alongside them as they sort of make these decisions. So that's why we're making the staff recommendation to appoint the executive director as that non-voting director. I'll open it up for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matt. Any questions from the board? Yes.
I have a comment. I just want to say that I really appreciate this item. Those of us that also sit on SACOG have been very involved in this process. And I am wholeheartedly 100% in support of putting you on there and having you as our eyes and ears. So very glad to see this here before us today. So absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alice.
Yeah, not just eyes and ears. I don't think that there is any greater expert on tolling and managed lanes in our region than Matt. And so helping SACOG, Caltrans, and YOLO find their way in these initial steps, I think is incredibly important.
I agree with that. I'm actually glad I walked in on this because I definitely agree with actually both of them. I'm really excited that you will be there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
It'll be a huge asset.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Okay. Being none, we'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this item? In chambers, there's none. Then we'll bring it back. Is there anyone online who wishes to comment on this item?
No.
No. All right, we'll bring it back to the board for
Motion
action.
to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Any further comment? There being none, we get a roll call vote, please.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Cortez,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sylvie. All right, the next item on our agenda today is item N, and that is the state legislative program for 2024. And Matt, I believe you're presenting that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, and you've gotten your packet, our state legislative program for 2024. And as you know, we have Mark Watts on contract as our state lobbyist and advocate. And to be honest, this program and what we're looking to do this year isn't that much different from what we have been doing in years past. We're monitoring all of the bill information. Mark is wonderful about that. We have a monthly meeting. Of course, you've heard about the budget deficit, and this slide is old because when I put this together 2 weeks ago, the deficit was forecast at 38 to 60 million. I think it's is it 73 now? So I almost didn't put in the, but our priorities really remain the same in the sense that we want to have as much of the funding coming back to our county on a formula basis, a non-competitive fashion. So we're looking to support that formula-based funding and local control of funding, streamline project delivery, and just in general, other sorts of regulatory or state actions to take away that sort of local control. I will also sort of go off script and say, we have also been talking with some of our smaller jurisdictions about the fact that there is a certain funding floor that they get. And if you look at what that floor is, it is very low. And what we want to do is during the 24 session is look to see if there is any opportunity to start to have conversations with other regional COGs across the state and other small municipalities across the state to see, is there a way to adjust some of the fuel tax funding formulas so that that floor for the very smallest municipalities can be adjusted upwards in a way that doesn't unduly impact medium or larger sized municipalities. So that is something, while not part of our official legislative program in 24, something that we're going to start to investigate with other partners across the state, and then potentially, quite frankly, look to run a bill in 25 to do just that. But with that, I'll open the floor to questions and seek recommendation to adopt our state legislative program for 2024.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Questions or comments from the board?
I just want to say thank you so much. From one of those smaller jurisdictions, we really, really appreciate this legislation you working on this. So thank you.
I just want to echo that we do appreciate your starting the investigation phase now, looking to promote something next year legislatively. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? Nope, there being none, we'll open it up for the public to comment. Is there anyone in chambers? We do have a member of the public in chambers who wishes to comment.
Hi, Michael Garabedian, Placer County tomorrow. Thanks for this opportunity here. I have several concerns about the state program, but I'm going to focus on the item leverage for local transportation sales tax programs, including incentives for passage of new measures. And I'll be talking about this on same thing related on a couple other agenda items. I want to remind the board, the members who may not recall that the Senate Pro Tem Atkins bill, I think it was Assembly Bill 1413, is the one that allows this county to have sales tax measures on the ballot in a smaller portion, not including the unincorporated area, and in a certain city areas it identifies. And I think this is a big, very big mistake. For instance, the people that live in the unincorporated areas who might be able to not be able to vote on it are going to end up often paying that sales tax increase where they're shopping. That seems like a very likely outcome of that. And so the county's policy regard to that in efforts to make it easier to pass those sales tax measures also reflects on political lack of interest or awareness in the public having a full say, as full a say as possible. I hope you're not talking about a lesser percentage required for passage and things like that. So it was a major issue when it was on the ballot. The Republican Central Committee voted unanimously against Measure M back in 2016, and the Democratic Central Committee needed 60% to get it passed. They didn't get 60%, so it didn't get on the ballot, and most notably, it didn't get on their door hanger. So the major political party groups and the opposition to that measure prevented it from passing. And so you're by going to the rural areas, leaving them out has an awful lot of implications. And not to mention, as I'm sure a couple of you at least know that automobile sales are probably the biggest income source for Roseville, or a huge one, very important. So so you're playing with questions of where businesses are located in or out of incorporation and stuff like that. You're beginning to play with some important planning issues. And just briefly on the CEQA issue, the first thing under one, state legislative priorities, exemptions from existing right-of-way to reenactment of CEQA relief transit projects. I'll look into that to try to understand better what it is. We know you did a negative, the Caltrans did a negative declaration on the widening of Highway 65, which didn't make much sense. And thank you.
Mr. Garabedian, just a quick question for you. You made a comment regarding individuals in the unincorporated areas being impacted by a transportation tax if that tax were implemented. But are those individuals not traveling on the roadway infrastructure that is supported by and that tax would be utilized for?
Well, maybe you could explain the basis of the pertinence of that.
Well, you made a reference to there being an impact on them as if they're not seeing any benefit. However, if they're paying a tax by purchasing in the areas, they're going to utilize those roadways to travel to the areas where they're going to make those purchases. And therefore, that's the tax that's being paid, which is supporting that infrastructure. So I don't know that they're necessarily being negatively impacted as a result, because they're utilizing those roadways that are supported through the collection of that transportation tax, are they not?
Well, I think that sounds like a factor, a definite factor. Whether it's as large as somebody making the kind of decisions I mentioned, I don't know.
Okay.
Or what Roseville would think about its major income from automobile sales and that kind of thing. I think it's important to have this discussion though, and not act like we should do anything possible to help it pass, changing the boundaries of the vote area and needing to pay attention to the side effects.
Okay, great, thanks.
But thank you for your
Appreciate you
question.
clarifying that. Yeah, yes, sir.
Well,
All right. Thank you. All right, is there anyone else who wishes to comment in chambers on this item? Being none, do we have anyone online that wishes to comment on this item? Okay,
Peter Eklund, you're free to speak.
Comment on the sales tax measure at this point. There is a process going on at the legislative level that needs to be followed by pctpa. It has to do with the reform of transit funding. Right now, none of the routes in Placer County sort of meet their standards, and definitely not the overall standards that's required. And the reform is going to get rid of it's going to get rid of those requirements and replace it with something else, probably something to do with level of funding or ridership or something like that. Who knows? But it's a process that's already in progress, and you just need to follow it. You know, there's meetings. There's going to be a meeting every 2 months for the whole year, and then they're going to come up with a project at the end. It just happens that there's a person living in the county who is on one of the board members. She's a professor at UC Davis, and so it would be at least advisable for someone in pctpa to go talk to her. It's a her, and provide some input on what are the needs and basic needs for smaller suburban areas. I think she would be willing to listen.
great. Thank you, Mr. Eklund. And I actually have some emails from you I need to follow up on, so I'll touch base with you to get more information regarding the individual you reference. All right, anyone else online wishes to comment on this item? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board for any additional questions or comments. There being none, could we get an action on this item?
I'll move adoption of the state legislative program for 2024 as recommended by staff.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this item. Any further discussion? There being none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Cortez,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
Joyner,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Next item on our agenda is item O, Federal Legislative Program for 2024. And I believe, Matt, you're going to present that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Much like the item that was just before you at the state level, this is its companion at the federal level. And again, our federal legislative stance and the things that we are focusing on remain unchanged from 2023. Some of those in a high level are before you on the slide. Again, increasing formula-based funding over discretionary funding. And then also seeking both congressional directed spending, AKA earmarks for certain high priority projects within the pctpa area. And earmarks, and then also grant opportunities. As I've come before this board before and let you know, we've been very successful in having initial conversations with the USDOT and certain of our federal delegation around 8065. We've also worked with SACOG and their process as they look to put together what the regional federal priorities are and let them know that 8065 is our large, federal priority, and it's something that we'll discuss at cap to cap with some of those regional efforts, and when we have those one-on-one meetings. Just by way of note, we will be attending cap to cap in April, and I think a number of you will be as well. We're currently getting one-on-ones together to, with TFG and Mike, our federal lobbyist. I will also note, I actually have it in the executive directors, but I'll note it now while it's on the top of my mind. We're looking to have a Sunday lunch with TFG, with everybody who's going to be attending cap to cap. So we can get together and go over some of those federal priorities in more depth with our federal lobbyist in DC. So what we're asking for is for the adoption of our federal program and directing ourselves and TFG to represent us in DC.
Great, thank you, Matt. Bring it back to the board. Any questions or comments for Matt on this item? Nope, there being none, I'll open it up to the public for comment. Anyone in chambers wishes to comment?
Thank you. Mike Garabedian, Placer County Tomorrow. Well, as some of you might guess, I couldn't disagree more with the federal programs. The the 8065 interchange. Did not oppose when that safety improvement was made a few years ago. It was vitally needed. Highway 65 widening, Placer Parkway phases 1 and 2. Just have the whole concept of the Placer Parkway is a serious problem about how to manage future transportation. You have the handout that I've given you all about how increasing capacity does not relieve congestion. I think anybody with common sense who's driving that now can see there's a problem and it's going to get worse. And adding lanes and adding tens of thousands of more units is not going to solve the problem. What we should do now, should we stop? Should we go ahead? But these old chestnuts, these plans from long, long ago are just no longer workable. I don't have the answer to what's workable, but making this our priority with the feds, given the complexity of, I took at Caltrans, I took their program. They have a state, it's a transportation funding workshop they have that goes for a whole day. I did that 4 or 5 years ago. And the complexities that goes into making those decisions happen, as you all probably know now, is it's a maze. It's just a maze. And the number of factors that has to be taken into. So have these as our priorities, I think is a mistake. I don't know what it's going to take for us to wake up and say, we have to do something else because it's not working. And I grew up, I was born and raised in San Francisco, and I saw the three-way building. The neighborhood I went fought the Panhandle Freeway and stopped it because it went through a neighborhood that ended up resulting in one of the major civil rights organizations opposing it because it wiped out so many houses in that community. But that was really the beginning of the process because it led to tearing down the Embarcadero Freeway and others because there was earthquake damage. And that really enlivened the neighborhoods in the city to get rid of these freeways and to figure out how to get people through the city and not have this, to see the old map of all the freeways that were proposed all over that city, which didn't make any sense. And this reminds me of that. What I see here, the foolish sticking to consistency when we need to figure out something new to do. And the needs of the casino to have some access way that are dependent on highway access, when we need to have that part of some new way to get people to where they're going, including the casino. And I suggested at one of the Board of Supervisors meeting and got some positive receptivity afterwards from one of the tribe board members, that they need to look around the world and see how casinos are getting access now by tramways or other ways, what's going on in airports to move people. Something serious has to be done because the people in the future are going to look back and say, why do we spend all this money? It's not doing anything for us. So I just really think that if you could have some process to start developing a new federal policy, good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
very much. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to comment on this item? In chambers? No? How about online? Do we have anyone online that wishes to comment?
No.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Any further questions or comments? There being none, could I get an action on this item?
I move. Approve. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? There being none, Solveig, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
I think she's gone.
Cortez,
Aye.
Dowden Calvia.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda today is item P, the Transportation Sales Tax Expenditure Plan and Process Update. Matt, again.
Still me, 2 down, 3 to go, something like that. So, okay, so there's a lot here to sort of unpack. As far as what we want to really talk about is sort of highlight with you all the sort of process we're about to go through and preparing the expenditure plan for presentations, March through April. Just, I guess, a few things. The draft ordinance is complete. The draft expenditure plan is complete. The draft ballot language is complete. And as a reminder, we are polling right now at 68 with regards to the measure As a reminder, and it was actually brought up, due to AB 1413, we have the ability to carve out a smaller sales tax district, which we have talked about doing, that district being Roseville, Rockland, and Lincoln. However, we still have to take the expenditure plan to all 6 municipalities and the county. And so what you see before you on the screen is that process. And it's important to understand that what we're asking of the 6 municipalities in the county is not to vote to put the ordinance on the ballot. That is the exclusive purview of this board. What we're asking them to do is approve the expenditure plan. That is the action that they were taking, which is essentially to say to approve the project list. And the project list looks very much like it has in years past. So this is the process starting in March. April 9th, you'll see is a busy day. We've got 3 of our 7 presentations on that day. And then what will happen if we move through that process, we'll then come back on the 24th of April, have a first reading of the ordinance and the expenditure plan to all of y'all, and then do it again with that second reading on May 22nd. So that is the official process we're about to engage in. So just as a reminder, and it's in your packet, and I think you've seen it, but I wanted to bring this back. When we talk about the expenditure plan, we're talking about both programmatic buckets and specific projects. When it comes to specific projects, those are detailed out for the component of the expenditure plan known as major highways and roads. Those are the projects listed out in front of you, and that represents 52% of the spending. 25% is then local transportation, meaning those dollars flow right back to Roseville, Rockland, and Lincoln. And then I won't read the slide to you, but you can see how it breaks down for the other programmatic buckets. And as a highlight and as a reminder, we are limited. We as pctpa, acting as the local sales tax authority, we are limited to 1% for accountability and administrative oversight. HDL, the economic forecast is that this will bring out 1.56 billion over 30 years, just focused on transportation. I think it's also important to point out that this revenue cannot supplant revenue. It can only supplement revenue. So any spending that we're already engaged in, or Roseville, Rockland, and Lincoln, AKA the district is engaged in, must continue at its level. And then these monies would be used on top of that for infrastructure spending. That is part of the state law. So a few quick other notes, and then it's hard to guess what everyone's questions are, so I'll keep it brief and open it up for questions. But we did present this to the TAC and got concurrence with the expenditure plan. And I also want to point out that the expenditure plan is ACA 1 compliant, and that might just be, what is that, 6 words on a bullet, but that's important. ACA 1 will be on the November ballot, and it has to do with both housing and infrastructure. And what it basically says is it says if it passes, your threshold for approval goes from 2/3 to 55%. Now, a big caveat here, we are not counting on its passage. We are not hoping for or not hoping for its passage. We've always believed that it's our duty to go get 2/3 of the majority of the people inside of the district to vote to the affirmative for this. However, we do want to make sure that our expenditure plan is compliant with ACA 1. There are certain things in that law that basically indicates we can spend money on certain things and other things we cannot spend money on. Specifically speaking, we cannot identify operations as part of our expenditure plan, whether that be for transit, bicycle, roadway operations as well, things like the freeway service patrol. Nothing that's operational in nature can be funded by the sales tax measure. Quite frankly, our measure was largely heavily capital-based anyways. There was very little money in there from an operational perspective, but what we did do is to ensure ACA 1 compliance is we did pull any reference to any operational spending out of our expenditure plan. So a lot is wrapped up in that, but what it essentially means is if ACA 1 were to pass and be an affirmative, and we would be down ballot of that, our vote threshold would decline from 60, 2/3 essentially. I always want to call it 67 instead of 66.67, but from 2/3 to 55. And so our expenditure plan is compliant with ACA 1. So this is a big one. We've got 3 actions for you today. We're asking you to direct us to send the draft of the expenditure plan to the jurisdictions for approval, request the cities and the town of Loomis and the Board of Supervisors to consider resolutions to approve. And then if there are sufficient approvals, then move forward with the first reading on April and then in May. So those are the 3 actions we're asking. Let me pause there and take your questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matt. Questions from the board?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I won't speak for everybody on my council, but I do not see them disagreeing with me. But as far as I'm concerned, Loomis, we recognize the regional value, especially for the communities of Lincoln, Rockland, and Roseville. But we look forward in doing our part in helping push these through. So I just wanted to make that comment. I think it's very important.
Thank you. Alice?
Just a real quick question, and maybe it's premature to bring this up, but I do remember when this came before the various cities in the past, there was a little revenue sharing piece of that. Will that be brought forward as well? I didn't see that in the documents today, but is that something that is still on the table?
So I think this is something that's been brought up. And so it's a good time to have this sort of dialogue around this idea of revenue sharing. And I think this is something that, quite frankly, was out in the ether, and there was a lot of conversations about this idea that if we were to do this, some of the non-district municipalities might receive different versions of LTF or things like that, right? The way that we've read it, and I can ask Deanne if she wants to come up and help me in answering this, is the part of AB 1413 that looks at not supplanting revenues, but supplementing it. I don't know that legally we would have the ability to do that, to basically, take existing other funding sources and move them around between municipalities or the county that's not inside of the district. So I know this was spoken of in the past, in past efforts, but I don't know that it would have been legal to do so.
So I believe that I recall seeing that revenue sharing proposal on our council agenda as part of the packet when we took a position. So it's interesting now that we're finding that it might not have been legal.
Yeah, there's only one general counsel here, and it's not me. So I'll phone a friend, and Dean, feel free to disagree if I've misrepresented the
Yeah,
truth.
Deanne Gillick,
It
General
was before your
Counsel.
time, so.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I know in 2020, a couple things. In 2020, the sales tax measure was considered, but didn't go the final step.
Yes.
So I'm not sure what discussions took place in 2020 and that I wasn't privy to. I know it didn't go all the way forward. AB 1413 was passed before 2020, which gave pctpa the ability to carve out a portion of the county for the sales tax measure rather than it being countywide. And the language of the statute says, any revenues derived from the tax shall supplement and not supplant other transportation and transit infrastructure and service revenues available to the portion of the county to which the tax applies. So that's the provision we would be interpreting. I think it's Matt's recommendation that does not allow us to take LTF or TDA funds that would go to the area of the sales tax measure and not give it to that area and give it to someone else in the county. So I think that the representation and the interpretation would be, we can't take TDA funds that would otherwise go to that area, the county that now has the sales tax, and not give it to that area, but give it to someone else. Of course, the implementation of the policy, in the future always has ability to be flexible. We've gone through the funding today for, funding the STA, the TDA, and that, and there's always flexibility, but we must be consistent with the statute that I just read. So it, may be difficult. Our threshold is it shall supplement and not supplant transportation and transit revenue available in the sales tax area.
Yeah, I just remember, and I don't remember all the legalese that went around it, but I just remember that there was that opportunity and it was something to help sweeten that. Certainly, the city of Auburn is, recognizes the significance and the need for additional dollars down in South Placer. Someone who drives on 65, almost all the way to William Jessup, almost, many times a week. I recognize that. So, but I just, I guess I'll just need to look into it a little bit more myself, but because I don't remember how that was proposed, and it's unfortunate because I know, you weren't on the council at that time from Loomis. Trinity may remember something online, but it was really, Auburn, Loomis, and Colfax that was to benefit a little bit, so.
Yep.
And I don't know, Trinity, if you're online, if you remember any of that, or
Trinity's not on.
she's not online.
Drop off.
She dropped off.
If I
Okay, well, then it's just me there. So.
And if I could through the chair, you are remembering this correctly, and I've had in the last, 14 months, many conversations with staff from all over the place, and there was a lot of this conversation going on. I just don't think that AB 1413 was maybe being accurately sort of interpreted in those conversations. And quite frankly, that's shame on us, because I think we went around and had a lot of that dialogue, but the dialogue that we were having was, I think, based on sort of a faulty understanding of the law. And that's, obviously it predates me, but I'm not going to just sit here and say, well, it predates me. I'm in this chair now and I will own that. And I think that is why we very much want to do everything we can to find other ways when there are non-formula based opportunities to help the smaller municipalities to do that. And I do think, whether that's through the seeking of grants or other things, you have our rock solid commitment that we're going to do that. We're not going to just represent Southwest. We are going to represent our entire area. And we're just going to have to do that and come at that from different angles when it comes to funding and revenue and what we can legally do. But you're remembering it correctly.
And I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And, I appreciate, our residents from Loomis, Auburn, Colfax, unincorporated up here that are traveling down there to purchase items and paying that extra sales tax are utilizing those roadways. As Mr. Chairman, you pointed that out. And so there is that, certainly that nexus. I see that. So, and I don't have an issue with that. So, but I do appreciate your acknowledgement that this was something that was on the table previously. It sounds like the legal interpretation is different now than it was then. So thank you for clarifying that for me. And I will hold you to that commitment to look out for us, the smaller jurisdictions, so that we can benefit as well. Because I know that would be very difficult. The polling shows that if you brought that all the way up here to get that passed. And so I certainly don't want to jeopardize that by saying, let's just bring it to our voters as well. So, so thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Just, now, would this eliminate the opportunity for grant programs?
No. This will actually make it better because right now, a lot of those grants require a local match that we don't have. So when I talk about 1.56, that's hard revenue. There's a lot of soft money. A great example is the hard work that Corey did to bring back almost $500,000 for the active transportation program, right? We will have more opportunities to go forward, or the RAISE grant that I talked to you about earlier on the other item about federal advocacy. If we don't have the ability to come forward with a local match, then, our ability to go to DC and obtain, large chunks of grant funding is going to be heavily constrained. So it'll only make it better.
All right, thank you.
Great. Any further questions? Questions from the board? No? Okay, well, open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the public chambers who wishes to comment?
Mike Garvidian, Placer County tomorrow. First, I'll get to make a comment that would probably think, how could I be saying this against my own concerns? I helped elect Roseanne Vuich in Fresno, and she ran on a platform, including building the freeway 41 through Fresno, which was there at the time. It was cleared. And oh, she was elected on that issue, and then it was my job to help her build it. And I was at that meeting with Gian Turco and her the first time. Pretty amazing to watch that. Brown had hired her to stop freeway building. But the way she got it in the very earliest days of the Transportation Commission, everybody wanted all these other freeways like surrounding Fresno, like have now, and different projects around the district. But the way she got it was by saying, that's it. One project. I was elected to do that. I'm going to get it, and that's what I care about. So anyway, for some war stories from the measure back in 2016. There was a debate. Myself and Tom Hudson, we were debating then Supervisor Euler and the campaign manager for it, who's known for his activities all over the state for Republican and other issues. And it was quite a debate. We could talk more about it sometime. As I remember, that one was about 1.5 billion. Now this is 3 billion. So I have to look at this. I really can't comment too much on that. It was very interesting, though, that the League of Women Voters, they did around the county. They did sessions on the different state proposition, but they don't touch the local ones for some reason. I think it's really important to. I think you might have been referring to her a little while before. This book, Shifting Gears by Susan Handy of UC Davis. She might have been the person someone was talking about. You have the handout on how adding capacity does not relieve congestion, the whole message of San Francisco and other places that have gone in a different direction. And so I do recommend this book and reading the handout. And I've already commented about where we go from here on this. That debate was it was a podcast or something, some kind of debate, very interesting, well listened to, and well argued out. And the thing that you need to figure out how to do is not to have these sessions where someone goes around selling the program, getting and misleading the people about how this is going to relieve their congestion. It's not going to happen. And so that is going to be $1 million was spent to pass that initiative, and almost nothing was spent except shoe leather. I remember the meeting of the meddlers in Auburn when that came up at their meeting there, and so I was there for an environmental group, and someone asked the question, why is the Sierra Club opposing this project? And so that opened a whole discussion there, and the thrust of their discussion was this: why should we vote on this? We can vote on our own measure, which is sort of what Roseville has done on different projects. So that was an important lesson that turned that area around. At least a lot of people in that area saying, wait a minute, why should we be supporting this thing? And some of you probably know that story better than me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garabedian. Do we have anyone else in the public who wishes to comment on this item? In chambers? No? Do we have anyone online?
We do.
Okay.
Peter Eklund, you're free to speak.
Okay, I want to present a strong counterpoint to Mr. Garbedian's argument. I followed this process for the last 3 years, and I understand the complexities and everything else. And it's nice to know that there's now there's two other options to, there's a second reading and a third reading. I didn't really understand that initially. So, I think the thing needs to be approved, and it is what it is. The process went on. Now, I can discuss with Matt, and I have, about the meaning of words. When is an express project a BRT project, or vice versa? But those are superficial arguments which we have, and in retrospect are, I think, okay on both our parts. But the thing needs to be approved, and what has to be provided to the public is almost all of the projects are gap closures. They're not adding throughput capacity. They're important in gaps, and it's without the projects, there's an enormous increase in delay time. The projects on I-80 Douglas area and the additional lanes on 5th 65, they're gap closures. And on 65, 65 is an important, basically an arterial project. It provides a lot of traffic locally, but even sometimes between adjacent interchanges. And so they're important. Every one of them is important. Now, I think have to sell the thing, but I think what's needed, I've read, the sales tax measure itself is confusing. And I think what needs to be done is to take some of the questions that have come up and things like that and write something that explains how it fits into the plan and how it's being addressed. And that's what needs to be done. And that's not really selling, that's just explaining, but do it in a way that doesn't say, oh, we don't think your projects are valuable, or the transit isn't valuable, or something like that. Just try to explain, explain people's concerns. Okay, final thing is, there are some uncertainties that I think are important to address as part of these questions. For example, the rail project, it's going to be funded from Sacramento to Roseville. What's phase 2? Well, logically now, with the sales tax measure, it should be Roseville to Rockland. And once it reaches to Rockland, it makes it really accessible to Auburn and everybody else, because you can get a bus right there. If I remember correctly, actually phase 2 initially was supposed to be Roseville to Auburn, but I think by the next 30 years, concentrate on getting to Rockland. The other thing is, there's now three bus routes between Auburn and East Rockland, and right now Rockland subsidizes every one of them based on the formulas, and this has to be recognized and exchanged. There's going to be some negotiations on which routes are kept and how they're modified and all that out. And there's no one way to do that, but it will be explored in the COA, but it needs to be explored. Right now, a Rockland resident.
Mr. Eklund, I need you to wrap up your comments, please.
Okay. Can I finish just a sentence?
Yes, sir.
Phase 74, it has a large percentage of the ridership, but pays a small amount. Anyway, I hope I provide a good counterpoint to Mr. Garbidian's
Thank you. Yes, thank you for your comments, Peter. Right, do we have anyone else from the public online that wishes to comment?
No.
Okay, I will bring it back to the board. Any comments or questions? If not, could I get an action on this item? Move approval.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? There being none, Sylvia, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris, Cortez,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins. Motion passes.
Great, thank you, Sylvia.
Point of inquiry really quick.
Yes.
Legal counsel, what was that bill number again? AB 1412?
Yeah, and it
1413.
1413, and it's government code 67912. Government code.
67912.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you. Okay, next item on our agenda is item Q, the pctpa and Sacramento Area Council of Governments, or SACOG Memorandum of Understanding.
All right, one more time. Let's keep this going. And first of all, I want to recognize that Eric Johnson, Deputy Executive Director for SACOG, is joined us virtually through Teams. I do want to take a quick moment to acknowledge him and let you know that the memorandum that we've been working on for, gosh, I feel like we've been talking about this for 6 or 8 months, is coming before you today. And Eric was instrumental on the SACOG side, working with James in all of us. So we couldn't have gotten it done with a lot of his assistance. So I want to thank Eric and everybody at SACOG. So just quickly to level set for everyone, we have had a memorandum of understanding with SACOG when we both had different names back to 1975. And so when I started digging into this and going back to the archives, I have 12 inches of paper on my desk digging into this thing. And as you know, we got federal corrective action, which began in 2021, initiating the need for the new MOU when I came on board as executive director, and having some initial meetings with James, we both acknowledged that due to the federal corrective action, it would be good to have a new memorandum of understanding. So we began those conversations more than a year ago, January of 23. I think SACOG, and I don't want to speak for them, Eric's welcome to add if he'd like, but we all collectively talked, and it involved EDCTC as well, about we needed to acknowledge the federal corrective action in our memorandum of understanding. And then, you know, we, in investigating what we were paying SACOG for the services received, wanted to renegotiate those funding levels and that formula. And so as part of this MOU, we acknowledge that we are part of the 6-county funding program for federal dollars, which is managed and ran by SACOG. And Rick Carter of our staff has been part of the funding working group that SACOG is leading. And on their end, you know, the way we're funding SACOG goes all the way back to the 80s, where we give them 2% of our LTF. And so as our economy has grown, sort of that contribution has really outpaced our population growth or CPI. And really shame on us for not, you know, pointing this out earlier and saying, hey, you know, we think there might be an imbalance here. But we brought that to their attention. And in conversations with both Eric and James, you know, we really said what this MOU has to be. It just has to be just based on the fundamentals of fairness and equity. That's what it has to be. Just, you know, instead of getting into, you know, getting all the lawyers around the table, just, you know, what is fair? And we had a lot of conversation about what was fair. And we went back and forth, and this is where we arrived at. And so SACOG has agreed to a new lower base funding of $330,000 for fiscal year 25. We will pay them $522 this year. So it's a good reduction. And then that funding will increase based on the California CPI instead of LTF, which means as our economy grows, you know, we won't find ourselves in 10 years where we feel we're overpaying for the services that SACOG provides us. Well, we do recognize that SACOG does provide us a lot of value in what they do for us as the federal MPO. So we've talked about it a bunch. The full MOU's in your packet. I'll open it up for questions. We're asking for action for allowing me to sign the MOU. If you do take that action, it will go to SACOG next month, and then James will sign it, and it will be it'll be done.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. Questions from the board?
Let's do this quick before they change their mind.
Yeah.
I don't have any questions. I just want to show appreciation, Matt. Thank you very much for preparing this and working with SACOG to make these changes. I think they absolutely are prudent. And kudos to you on the $192,000, almost $193,000 savings that we will achieve when this is signed. So thank you very much for your due diligence on this. And it's absolutely important, I believe, that we make these changes. So thank you.
I had made a note in this too when I was reading, and it's 192,755,000. So I just want to say thank you. You have, just in the few months that I've been here, you have restructured and saved this agency so much money. And I just really want to show appreciation for that. You are doing an incredible job. So this is awesome.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? No? Okay, we'll open it up for the public. Does anyone from the public in chambers wish to comment on this item today? Being no one from the public, do we have anyone online who wishes to comment?
We do.
Okay.
Eric Johnson, you're free to speak.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Eric Johnson here with the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Again, thank you for the comments from Matt introducing this item. We've been working with him and his team for the past year on this MOU. And I just wanted to say, again, in appreciation for the partnership. We've really seen great cooperation at all levels of the organization between PCTPA and SACOG, how I think this MOU will be carried out going forward. And so just appreciate all the hard work, and thank you for your consideration this morning.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Any additional questions or comments from the board? Could I get an action on this item?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? There being none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
Yes.
Cortez,
Aye.
Bowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. As discussed earlier, we had moved item I after item Q, so we're going to return to our public hearing with item I. David, is there any additional items from staff perspective for presentation?
I can have the clicker to get back to the. Yeah. Just want to. Yep, lost it. I just wanted to get to the map here. Okay, so just a little context, and then there's two paths forward for the board here. So this map represents the airport land use compatibility plan. So it's basically, you know, a 300-page document distilled to one map. The map, yeah, as I went through, we do we look at 4 factors for consistency. So safety, noise, airspace, and overflight compatibility. So these zones reflect all of that math that goes into determining, looking at those factors into creating these zones, which then there are policies in the plan that support, you know, what can happen in these particular zones. And so this board approved this in 2021, and there was staff participation by all the airports at that point in time. So, and then during this review period in 2021, the county also had its housing element come forward. And so, and this board made a determination of consistency on the housing element. That said, there was a very large inventory of sites considered in the housing element inventory. And of course, as part of the draft housing element, and then you got to the final housing element, this board weighed in and we opined that there were a number of sites in the B1, B2 areas that could not support multifamily. And those sites got dropped out into the final housing element. So coming forward here with the housing element rezone project, you have 72 sites. So those 72 sites were, for practical purposes, pragmatic purposes, were sort of a distillation, you know, of a process where those sites were deemed compatible by the Airport Land Use Commission. Okay, so just that said, you have Auburn staff that have legitimate concerns about housing development within the airport influence area, and particularly resident, you know, densities. And so, and those are like safety and noise concerns. And so I just wanted to put that on the table that there are concerns with current staff with respect to what the plan proposes with respect to how residential will be dealt with in this particular airport influence area. That said, you know, the board adopted this plan and this map. And so when we do a consistency determination, it's sort of, as Director Wilkins had indicated, sort of a technical approach. And so we have these properties that went through various reviews, and we get to 72, which is actually 13 in this influence area, that fall within sites that we said over several years were compatible. So it was good to take the break and to talk, because we got clarification from county staff that the county board of supervisors directed the staff, the county staff, to go forward with 19 sites. Okay, so 72 to 19, so it's a big change. And within the airport influence area, these 13 sites, there's only 2 sites that are being recommended of that 19, and that's sites 42 and 51, and they are within the zone C2. So in terms of making a consistency determination today, you have two paths that where you could go forward. You could have a narrow consistency determination that basically limits the consistency determination to sites 42 and 51. Okay. Okay, I was following what you circled, though. Yeah, so, okay, all right, all right. Rewind a little bit here. A little bit of humor. Sites 43 and 51. Okay, well, 43 is encumbered with, it's split between two zones. And so how you develop that site is a site design issue that will be dealt with at that, at that particular point when there's an actual project. But with 43 and 51, they require overflight notification. So you could limit your consistency determination today to those two particular sites. So that's the narrow path. Okay. A more flexible path would be you do the consistency determination on all 13 sites. There is concern with that expressed by Auburn staff because those sites are also identified within the 72, which is in your EIR. And so it may give sort of life to those sites in the future. The flexibility there is if you go with the narrow path of just the two sites, and if the county board says, let's bring back some of these other sites, that means the county staff have to come back for this commission or a consistency determination because you narrow it, it's just those two. And that sort of does not work with the timeline that the county has in getting all of this done and getting it to housing and community development. So you could go with the narrow path of the two sites, just with the understanding, particularly the county, that if you reintroduce these sites, got to come back. Okay. If you keep the consistency determination for all 13 sites.
Is it 13 or 11? I'm sorry. I read 11.
13.
Am I not, did I not read it correctly? I apologize.
I think there's, it's 13 total and 11 in C2.
Oh, thank you for
Yeah.
the clarification.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's all right. So if you go with the broader path and approve all 13 sites, that provides the county staff flexibility. Notwithstanding, everybody knows at this point in time, at least, that the county board has directed, the staff to narrow the number of sites being reviewed for the county board approval. And so it's a matter of which way you want to go. And the narrow path sort of hamstrings a little bit the county staff with respect to scheduling. If a new site gets reintroduced, you got to come back. So it's those two there. So anything else? I think at this point, probably, so those are the two choices. The other thing that we talked about, so, the airport influence area here also falls within Auburn's sphere of influence. And this is more of a process question. And I suppose the commission can make a recommendation to the county, but it may be helpful that with respect to residential projects, that there is more involved review with city staff on those particular projects, because if this airport influence area and the city owns the airport, it all falls within the sphere of influence. And so it may be that as part of a process with any projects that move forward, that there's greater participation by city staff in looking at and reviewing, project applications that come forward. And so in that regard, then site design issues, particularly, and then, building quality issues and structure issues and how things are arranged, so that they meet safety and noise, concerns, can be addressed at that particular level. And I think with that, probably the city staff may want to say or have a few words, and perhaps Callie with the county may also have a few words. So I will conclude.
Oh, what are we, afternoon yet? No. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commission members. Jonathan Wright, Community and Economic Development Director. And I got up this morning, obviously, like already confessed, this was not where I was going to be standing at this time of the day. I do want to go on record though, and we've already been on record with the county with our concerns over the amount of development that's being proposed in the airport influence area for the Auburn Airport. Those concerns are outlined in the October 13th, 2023 mailing to Chris Schmidt, Principal Planner, Placer County. At that point, we opposed every upzoning residentially in that area, or even creation of residential zones in that area. I've been with the city for 2.5 years now. I got blessed at the airport about 2 years ago. Unfortunately, I won't say unfortunately, that we had city staff participation in the airport land use compatibility plan. And it was our fire chief, and it would, we're a small city. We do what we can. We try to participate and involve ourselves. 2 years into this, I look at our airport land use compatibility plan and realize, wow, we have given up already a ton of our overflight area to residential development. So we have the Green Means Go sites that are in there. We've negotiated to a 20 unit per acre density, which is a lot of residential development. Now, it started off with, this isn't affecting the Lincoln Airport. This isn't affecting, was the Blue Canyon Airport, because none of these things are happening around those airports. All of this is happening within the Auburn Airport influence area. We've had, since I've been here, a couple of plane crashes, went into a house within that circle there, right about outside where the proposed residential development, or where the existing Green Means Go residential development site is. I can tell you on a daily basis, practically, well, on a daily basis, let's be honest, I get a number of complaints from areas in and around the C2 area where we're proposing this development. Those people attended those meetings that we just went to with the county, with the airport land use compatibility adoption of the latest overflight zone, which will allow us to extend our runway for safety. Those people all cite noise, safety, all those issues that are absolutely fundamental to you making this decision today. Now, seeing that many sites within our airport influence area really has given city staff a lot of concern. That's why we responded the way we did. We've been talking to county staff. We've been working on a compromise. And we believe that the 2 sites that have been proposed are something that we could probably live with. We understand RENA. We understand that we have those same issues. We don't understand why all of the RENA numbers have to be done within the airport influence area. All that's going to do is, at the next venue that we go to do an airport land use update, is you're going to need a bigger venue to pack all the people in there. That's all you're doing, is bringing more people into that influence area. We have just expanded the airport in capacity. We have 50 some odd new hangars, including Placer County's new hangar down there. We have a lot more aircraft flying in and out of there. We have a busy, active airport. It's a great place to be. It's an economic driver. It's you could sit out there at Wings and watch all the aircraft come and go. You go up to Grass Valley, you go down to Lincoln, and you hear the birds, you hear the wind. Up there, you hear the hum of helicopters and all the different activity that's going on there. It's a great airport. And yet, disproportionately, we have a lot of residential development, which I don't deem to be a compatible use within that area. Understood. We've been down the road here. We've given some concessions. I don't believe that the city can give concessions to all those sites. And I know that they're saying that there's only 2 candidate sites, but this EIR is going to pave the path for those other sites to go through, which means that is no longer has to do the environmental assessment. Now, within those sites there's topographic changes of hundreds of feet. And each one of those sites should stand on its own merit, doing an environmental impact report and coming to this board, because of the fact that we have a lot of topographic changes out there. And when we're looking at development, we're looking at safety, and we're looking at allowing residential uses in that area, we need to be mindful of the topography and of the fact that not every place is a great place to build housing. So I would say that of the 2 options, I think the city can live with the softer option of looking at those 2 sites. I understand RENA, I understand all those things, but to include all those sites in your analysis, we're not in support of. And I just want to go on record as that. I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't want to say PCTPA staff has been great. And county staff, and I'm sorry to kind of step in at the show at this point. I thought based off of our response we've already sent to the county and the discussions we had that this was already being considered, but it just hit me at the last minute that they're still on the map. And you guys are a very fundamental part of the decision-making process to our airport. And anything you do affects my job in the future. And of course, something happens, we're all going to be on the hook. So, no questions?
Questions from the board?
I don't have questions for Jonathan, but I do have comments that I would like to make when it's appropriate.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, sir.
I have a question, Jonathan, and thank you for being here. So what I think I understand is that from a city kind of planning standpoint versus a county planning standpoint, there's concern with the number of sites that are potentially being considered in the vicinity of the airport. The reason I asked my earlier question about, is this a policy? I didn't ask if it was a policy exercise. I asked, is it a technical exercise? Is that the policy on the airport influence zones, that happened a few years ago, and it was adopted by this board. It was adopted, and it was reviewed extensively by the local agencies. So I just see our job right now as more of a technical job. If we were looking at updating the airport land use plan right now, this, all the points you made come squarely into consideration for me. At this point, we have an adopted airport land use plan. We're merely evaluating, where these development sites are within that adopted plan. And I think most of the comments I heard from yourself, while they're legitimate, but I think they're really better directed at the next airport land use plan update. So I guess the question is there disagreement in terms of the location of any of the sites that are being shown by the county and how they're mapped, and whether they're mapped properly with the adopted airport land use plan?
You're right. A lot of the policy decisions have already been made. We're here today from a safety and practical standpoint, unfortunately. At some point, should we relook at the airport land use compatibility plan? Yes, I think so. If I'm still here, I would definitely work to reduce the amount of housing that would be allowed in those areas. Just going to go on record. I just want to be clear, we've been in this process. It's a public process. We're allowed to give public input. The city at this point, as a stakeholder, is providing you with our public input on this decision and letting you know expressly that it will have impact on us in the future. Those policy decisions have been made in the past. You have the ability today, though, as a policymaker, to slow down the process. We're not asking you to change what could be in the future. We're asking you to limit the scope right now. We're doing this with all of the county sites that are within our sphere of influence, asking them to slow the process and narrow things down so that we can get to a point where it's mutually beneficial. It's in our sphere of influence. We're hoping that has some weight. Our general plan is not consistent with what has been going on out there, as far as what I can tell. But we do have this plan that we stand on. So not asking you necessarily to change the rules. I'm just asking you, please, to look at it at a smaller spectrum right now and allow those future sites to stand on their own, coming forward underneath the current policies.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the board for Auburn? No? Okay, thank you. I believe the county wished to speak on this as well. And we'll open it up to the public.
Thank you. Callie Kettinger Cecil, Senior Planner with the Planning Services Division. First, I'd like to recognize that a lot of work and analysis went into generating these maps based on all of the parameters that have been discussed here today to ensure the safety of all of our residents. One thing I would like to clarify is, as Auburn staff is aware, the county is not seeking to have all of our RENA obligation met with these sites. We have identified sites throughout all districts of the area. So I do want to correct and be on record that it is incorrect to say that the county is trying to meet all of its RENA obligation within those airport overflight zones, because that's just not factually correct. I do think that there is a benefit to having a consistency analysis done for all of the sites, even though the board has directed us to move forward with a smaller list. The reason for that is because the board, the direction the board gave was to continue considering. And so we are looking at those 19 sites. But one thing that's very important to keep in mind, and I understand that while this may not be as much of a concern for the pctpa, for the county, it is a concern, and that concern is the no net loss analysis. So if any of these sites that are rezoned are developed with a market rate product, or they are developed with something that is not residential multifamily, then the county has 180 days to rezone a property. So for example, if site 57, which we are not proposing to move forward with, that's not in our 19 sites, but say one of these sites was developed with a market rate product, and then we say, all right, well, now we want to look at site 57 as meeting those units that we've lost from that site being developed with market rate. Then we have to do another consistency analysis. Will that be able to occur within that very, very small 180-day window? I'm not really sure. I do think that efforts to hamstring this process or slow it down are not helping. We have been told we need to narrow our buffer, we need to narrow our scope, and we have been doing that. At a certain point, we need to recognize that we do need to have some kind of flexibility. Narrowing things to a point where we are stuck in a little box is very unhelpful. So from the county's perspective, we do think that this consistency determination should be done for all of the sites that are identified in the draft EIR, noting that when we come back to the board in May, staff is anticipating that we will be coming back with the 19 sites that the board has directed us to come forward with. And if any other sites do need to go through another process as a result of that no net loss analysis, then this consistency review will have already been done. As it relates to those sites that are within the draft environmental impact report, an argument could absolutely be made that if one of these sites that is not rezoned in May comes forward with a subsequent rezone, that there is some level of environmental review that has already been done. However, it's important to note that that environmental analysis is at a programmatic level. So there may be a need for site specific. So this EIR that the county is doing doesn't get everything all the way, right? So by including them in the project description, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easier for them. It does mean that we have done some level of environmental review. But for example, if one of these sites came forward 10 years from now and they wanted to use that existing environmental analysis, that may no longer be adequate for a number of reasons. So with that, I'm happy to provide any clarifications or answers to questions and appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of your board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the representative from the county? Yes, sir.
I actually have one. I think David earlier stated that most of these sites are within the sphere of influence of the city of Auburn. Could you tell me what relevance that has to a future project specific level or a specific project level review in terms of, is it the county still that's the land use review and permitting agency? I believe it is. And then does that give the city of Auburn a higher level of standing in that land use review process or not?
I don't know for sure if it would provide a higher level of standing, but it would ensure that they are involved in the review process.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Callie. Thanks for the presentation. So I'm curious, this list right here, have any of these been removed towards our final list that we sent forward?
So the sites that are on this map here do include sites that have fallen off, but it does include a handful of the 19, well, not a handful. It does include some of the sites that were identified by the board on February 13th, that 19.
Do you know what sites they were?
Do you have that list? Yes.
Okay, so those have been removed from the final list.
No.
13 sites. I mean, out of the 13 sites shown on the map, 11 sites have been removed.
Okay.
And two remain, and those are sites 43 and 51.
Okay, that's what I thought. So there's an issue with us limiting it to those two? If the other sites have already been removed from the list?
Well, you have a process question, and Callie could speak to it more so, but if we removed and just did the consistency determination on those two sites, should the county, like, for example, reintroduce site 61, then you would have not made a consistency determination on 61. So it would have to come back to this commission. And I don't know if we have a commission or a board meeting in April because of cap to cap, might have to have a special meeting. And then just given, the schedule that you have with HCD, I think it would
Right,
be problematic.
right. We're refining our list that's going to go forward. And it's not going to change much from what we've done. We don't have any time to change it. So, I mean, if those others have been removed from the list, are they going to be included in the EIR, the ones that have been removed?
All 72 sites that were originally identified are included in the draft environmental impact report.
Okay, and so basically, if they've been included in the draft EIR, then at some future date, if we have another requirement to identify properties, those will probably be plucked. And
Potentially,
potentially, I think probably more likely probable. I don't have a problem with limiting it to the two because basically what we've done at the Board of Supervisors, that's what's going forward. We're going to have we're going to look at the list, but they've sent the final list now. And I believe we have, what's our buffer? We've got a buffer. It's not as
3%.
not as big as they wanted, but
Madam Supervisor, may I just ask a clarifying question? Are you supporting finding the consistency for just the two sites, the site 43 and 51? Thank you. I would be supportive of that as well. Thank you.
Any other questions?
no, thanks, Kelly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now open it up to the public for comment. Anyone in chambers wishes to comment on this item?
I guess that means me.
Yes, sir.
Well, it's hard to know where to start, but I think we should start with the fact that the people who are affected aren't here and don't usually show up at your meetings. And I'm sure you did every legal responsibility to notice people and so forth, but still, they're not here. And I've heard to some of these different hearings and meetings, and the people don't know you exist in general and, are not here. And, it's hard to know what to do about that. They should be here. They should be involved. They should know you exist. They should know the kind of zone they're in and things like that. This is not to say anything negative about the work of the staff and both the county and so forth. If I only knew where to start, I'll start with my first appearance at a county board meeting back around 2002, where I was heckled by mountain bike leaders and equestrian leaders because of being concerned about a neg deck on a trail instead of an EIR. EIR was eventually done, but I have never seen an issue in those approximately 20 years where as many people are affected and concerned as the two issues here. The housing rezone and air flight, overflight, and construction in that area. And you're not doing your job if the people aren't aware that this is going on right now. I guess I've said that enough. So, how are you going to respond to this? It's going to be the same old thing where the county is in control and decided what they're going to do and they're going to run with it? Or are you going to do something to make sure the public knows you're here and knows what your responsibilities are and know what the rest of their lives are going to be like under this program when they should be involved and know what's going on, and they aren't. For some reason, I don't know why, they're not finding out and knowing specifically how they're being affected by your decision. I think that should weigh on every one of your consciences that you are here and the public is not here. If I had any great suggestions about what to do, it would start with doing a lot more than you're doing now, to have a session where the public gets to know who you are, has a chance where you go in the community, or they have meetings where you can have a public meeting on this whole thing. it's kind of silly to me, someone who might come in to be here at 9 o'clock, then told, given the chance not to say a darn thing, and then you have to wait till the whole end of the meeting. I mean, that reflects to me very much the problem that you have reaching out to the whole community. Not to be personally, because you're managing the situation and it's difficult. I might do the same mistake, but it is a mistake. It reflects, on the attitude towards the public, knowing what's going on about their future and their homes and the issues they raise at these meetings over and over about how they bought it and how there are problems in the air over their head. I happen to know something about what this transportation agency does and admire a lot of its work and highly critical of some of it. I don't envy any of you. I don't really have a dog in this show, except that the question of public involvement and them knowing and being here and you doing more than talking amongst yourselves. But I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have anyone else in chambers who wishes to comment on this item? Do we have anyone online, Solvay, who wishes to comment on this item?
No.
Mr. Chair, if I may. It was a couple of weeks ago, the Board of Supervisors had a hearing out at the County County Government Center in Auburn, where we heard this item about the RENA numbers. We didn't get out of that meeting till 8:30. The place was packed. We sat there and took all the testimony. So for someone to come up here and say we haven't notified the public is unfortunate. I'm talking right now, so be quiet. Damn it. All right. So anyhow, the public is aware of this. And they've been here, they've been to our board meetings more than once, and we listen to them and they know what's going on. And we've cut down the amount of parcels that were in the information. Now we're down to 13. So we still have a little flexibility in order to meet the state's requirements. If we tighten it up too much, the state's going to come in and tell us what we're going to do. So that's why this is very critical that we make this determination now instead of waiting for another 2 weeks or a month to hear this again. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. I knew, based on that question that was raised, I knew through my time serving on this body, we've had a number of airport land use discussions. And in some of those, we have had a fairly sizable attendance during that period of time. So I know that there are processes and procedures, and I know that the individuals impacted are receiving communication. Can you provide some insight in relationship to the notifications that are provided relative to these decisions and this meeting?
Okay, so with respect to this meeting, because it's a county-wide effort, so we just put a hearing notice, legal notice in newspapers of general circulation where there are airports. When we did the airport land use compatibility plan in 2021, we notified all of the property owners within each of the airport influence areas. So there were around 9,000 letters that went out to those individuals. And we probably got 100 plus or minus comments with respect to what is an airport land use commission? What's an airport land use compatibility plan? What does this mean to me? And so we did that because that was the policy plan effort, and we wanted to reach out to, the entire public. If a particular project came forward, say Site 43, and that came before us because it was a rezone, we would publish in the newspaper of general circulation of the airport, and we would also notify property owners within at least 300 feet. We would use whatever the county standard is because it's a county, parcel. And so we would notify those property owners. And as you've noted, we've had people then come and, testify about their concerns about a particular project. So generally so for this particular project, it was just notification in the newspapers of general circulation.
Okay, great, thank you.
Well,
And
will-
on
I
top
will-
of
I
that,
will- I
we
will-
also
I will
post
add that-
we also post our agenda online
Correct. And we also do a stakeholder notice. So there is an email distribution that goes to the county staff, the city staff. The Auburn has a committee for their airport, and we notified their president and vice president of that. And we also notify the community organizations that the county staff provide to us that have an interest in housing element or the housing element rezone project. So those organizations were also notified as well. And for whatever reasons, they're not here today, testifying.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank my colleagues for providing staff with an opportunity to go through with PCTPA and county staff to review the recommendations. Thank you very much for that privilege. Appreciate it greatly. Second of all, I appreciate the efforts of the county. I know that this, having to comply with RENA, and I appreciate the fact that you have.
Alice, can I just stop you for a second? Are these comments just in relationship, or do you have?
I don't have any comments. This is just my general comments. Do you?
Okay, so I'm going to close the public
Okay, got it.
hearing
Sorry.
and bring it back for
Okay.
comments. So apologize. I should have asked
Process,
before.
we gotta adhere to the process. So
Absolutely. So if there are no additional questions based on the comments, and appreciate staff addressing the concern relating to public notification and participation. So with that, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. And now I will open it up.
thank you
for
very much. So
discussion.
I apologize for that. I'm so process oriented and I wasn't paying attention to that part. So thank you very much. Again, I do express my appreciation, as I said earlier. This is a difficult situation. I understand the airport land use plan was adopted in 2021. I was not a member of this entity back in 2021. And now we are where we are. Certainly, as the city of Auburn, we receive numerous comments from individuals that live around the airport with regards to safety and noise. It's a constant thing for us, especially when you're mayor and it's your turn. The number of individuals that are commenting on noise and the efforts that we're trying to reduce those issues. And so noise and safety are huge issues for us. And I appreciate what Jonathan testified today and what he had to say about that. Again, I know that these numbers have been narrowed. I am good with finding consistency for sites 43 and 51. I recognize that it might slow the process down a little bit should something happen with those other sites, but it's not completely eliminating the opportunity to move forward. But I would be supportive of finding that consistency for those sites with the recommendations. There's conditions, I think, for safety and also under, let's see here, safety and aerospace protection. So I would recommend that we adopt those conditions. But again, just for those two sites, again, the safety, and we've had accidents happen. We've had planes fly into homes, and luckily, I don't believe that it was just recent. No one died, but that's something that's very real. And so I would not be able to, in good conscience, find consistency for the other sites. I could only find consistency for those two sites with the conditions. And I would, I just want to make that clear. If the majority of the board wants to move forward with finding consistency for all, I would respectfully request that we bifurcate the motion so that I could vote for just the two and not the others. So just throwing that out there, although I would highly encourage my colleagues to just move forward with those two sites, given the significant impact to noise and to safety. And putting, we're talking about higher density homes. You have to take a look at, the socioeconomically disadvantaged individuals that might be out there. That's always out there for us to think about as well. And I just, in good conscience, can only support for those two sites. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I just also wanted to, again, thank staff for working with our city staff on that and apologize for the last minute of this. So that, again, I will take responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Auburn Airport is a regional asset, and it is not in the best interest of Placer County to hinder the development of the Auburn Airport. It never has been in our best interest. But by condensing this to 2 sites on the compatibility study ties the hands of our staff and the Board of Supervisors to move forward on this. And if the state comes in and says, no, you can't do this, then we have to go back through the process again. We're going to miss the March 15th deadline. And so I don't see the need to condense the areas in the airport overflight zone. Doesn't mean any of them are going to be developed, but we have to have them on the list to protect the county's interests on our RENA members. And so I can't support just the 2 items being on the list. So that's my comments. Just wanted to let you-
May I respond, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
With all due respect, Mr. Supervisor, the state is not going to get involved in the process between now and what goes to the Board of Supervisors. I think you're thinking about the overall RENA numbers and the overall plan, but the state's not going to get involved right after this commission takes action, just with due respect. I understand what you're saying overall, but.
Did you want to?
Yes.
Sorry, I know you've closed the hearing, but I do think it's important to note that as directed by the board, we are preparing a housing element amendment. So HCD is going to be looking at all of these sites probably within the next 3 weeks. So yes, that is a very important thing to note. Thank you.
So I didn't realize your housing element was being revised and going to the state in 3 weeks. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, thank you. You both.
Please. So I think I align with Dan on this one. I think there's a simple question before us, regardless of whether these sites are acted upon or not. Are they consistent with the plan? That's the only question. And if these sites are consistent with the plan, then I think we have to vote to say so. I don't think we can hold back. That there's a question that has been brought to us. Are these consistent? So as a former pilot, I got to tell you, I'm really concerned about 43. And if we could drill down on that a little bit so I can understand better, you're absolutely not building in the C1 zone, correct? But you're butting right up against it.
Yeah, the plan's policy with respect to C1 says multifamily development is not allowed within that. And so that's why, so C1 does allow for single family residential and other non-residential uses at a lower intensity or open space, or as I call it, public space parking. So the recommendation is that that portion of site 43 that falls in C1 has to be developed at a lower density residential or alternative use that's lower
But
intensity.
that could be max 20, right?
No, the map here, and I apologize because working with PDF and the maps, so 43 is not within the infill green zone. The C1 portion of that particular parcel does fall within the infill green zone. So it could go up to 20 units, but that would require a separate process to come back before this board when there's a development application, and you would review it in light of whether you wanted to grant a special condition to develop up to 20 units on that particular portion of the parcel. And what we're recommending here is that you have a condition to the county that basically says it's got to be a lower density use or an alternative use that is like parking or open space. And I think that having visited the site probably would just come up during the project review and design review portion of a particular application at that point in time. And so the parking for the multifamily development would probably occur or could occur within that C1 zone. And there's probably setback requirements also under county zoning that also would probably fall within that portion of the C1 zone. So I think it's highly unlikely that multifamily development would occur within that portion of the site. But, you know, I'd have to see a project and that project would have to go through review. So all we're saying here is that C1, no multifamily, lower density, or parking or open space. And so that then provides the county staff a parameter to give to any future developer that when they come forward to build, they can't build the multifamily in that portion of the site.
So when we say lower density,
Well, C1 allows for single family.
right? If you're going 20 to the acre and I'm in an airplane trying to make a turn back to the runway because I've got no engine, I see nothing but rooftops. There is no gap for me to put an aircraft down.
Well, yeah, if the board, so, I'm following what the policy say in the plan. But if the board just wants to go a step further and just say no residential within C1 and just keep it at parking or open space, that could be a board direction. And so we could change that recommendation.
I would encourage that we do so. It wouldn't happen anyway with us here, on a future board. You never know. Yeah, if we can codify that, that'd be great. Yeah, 43 is my greatest concern. I think the rest of it is a simple binary question. Is it compliant? Is it not? And I'm able to find that the sites that are here, well, as a pilot, I may not like how close they are in compliance with our plan.
Any further comment?
Yeah, just want to make a point on the discussion that you're talking about on 43 about changing anything. Once this stuff is identified and it goes forward to the state, those parcels, the entire parcel that's in this thing will be automatically rezoned to 20 to 30 units per acre. And it will not ever be unzoned. So you need to consider that when you're talking about we're going to change something, we're going to talk about something different. Once this goes to the state, they're going to identify it, and that parcel 43 will be rezoned 20 to 30 units per acre, and you will not be able to build anything other than that.
Correct.
Okay.
But when you build a 30-unit apartment complex, you will go through a project site design review. And the county zoning ordinance will have various requirements for landscaping and setback and public utility easements. And I guess what I'm just putting forward is that at that point in time, that portion of this parcel that falls within C1 could be designed in a way that the building that houses the 30 units per acre does not fall within that C1 zone. That's where the parking goes. That's where the landscaping or the trees go, or, the recreation equipment for children. So I think it's a site design consideration. And I think if you provide direction to the county staff that within the C1, no residential, these other alternative uses, okay, but no residential, I think, notwithstanding that the whole parcel is rezoned, I understand that, right? That when the time comes for development on that site, there will be a condition there that says, okay, well, we got to work within just the C2 part for the apartment complex. So,
Can I ask a question of county?
You're the boss.
Callie, have we included anything about design requirements on these parcels yet? I think is that a discussion to come up, or are we going to be able to do that?
All of these parcels would be subject to the multifamily and mixed-use design guidelines, as well as a design review. I do want to clarify, the proposed RM30 zone district does allow for other uses outside of residential multifamily. It also allows, for example, parks and playgrounds, houses of worship, also allows for mixed-use development. And we can absolutely limit certain areas. So for example, Suzanne, in your district, we have site 26 that has a portion of Linda Creek. that has to be avoided. So just because we're rezoning it or proposing to rezone it, doesn't mean that every single square foot of the site has to comply. There are areas that are going to be netted out. And so if if your board takes action today to further limit that area on the 0.6 acre parcel of site 43, that's something we could absolutely work with and take into consideration. HCD isn't going to say you need to exclude your safety determinations and put housing right here. Similar to that, HCD would not look at site 26 and say, well, you've got to put a house right into the stream system of Linda Creek or within the stream system setback. It's kind of a similar situation.
Right, but I think when they reduced the acreage from 17.8 acres to 9.9, didn't they carve out the buildable part of that parcel and then the wetlands is?
Right, and we could do something similar here as well. And I will point out the site is 0.6 acres. So we're talking,
Yeah,
and
I think-
1/3 of the site is in the C1 zone district. So we're talking about 0.3 acres.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Or you leave, if I may.
Okay.
I'm probably drifting outside of our authority here, but what's the importance of 43? Why is that still on the list?
So we have a RENA obligation to make, and that RENA obligation, the
We
state,
all have that, but why that location?
because it's one of the very few sites that the board has directed staff to continue considering. We only have a 3% buffer, so if we take off site 43, that starts eating into our unit capacity, and then we have to find another site somewhere else to make up for the units on site 43.
You have a
So
wetland.
maybe I'm not asking my question right. It is the closest and potentially most problematic location within this map that we're looking at. And yet it seems to be surviving the vetting process. Why?
So we have gone through an extensive review process on all 72 sites. We have gone to the board. The feedback that the board has received generated the direction that they gave on the 13th. Site 43 has a willing property owner, and it complies with all of the guidelines that are identified by HCD as it relates to RENA inventory. It could be seen as an infill site. And so those are a number of reasons why it has been included, similar to other sites. So if we're going to start taking off sites, then we are further reducing what we'll be able to rezone, and we may not be able to make our RENA obligation.
And you have no concerns about proximity to the airport?
That's not what I said. We absolutely take that into consideration. We have gone through an extensive vetting process. If we could find sites that everyone liked, that was outside of any concerns, there was no trees on the site, there's no wetlands, there's no people nearby, that's what we would be going for. These are the sites that are near services. They have been identified in the housing element. Site 43 was identified in the housing element that was adopted by the board in 2021. So this isn't a new site that has been added subsequent to adoption of the housing element. And it is needed in order for the county to fulfill its RENA obligation. If there were other sites, we could certainly look at that. It is part of the 19 sites that the board directed staff to continue considering.
So maybe I'll direct this to the two county supervisors here. In your minds, why does this location continue to stand out as a desirable?
Voluntary property owner.
Yeah, voluntary.
That's what I
property
heard.
owner, that's it.
That's it.
Yeah. But the idea that the county's gonna allow a higher, a high-rise facility there is not gonna happen. And we don't want to go to war with the city of Auburn. And they certainly will. And so it's, again, it's not in our best interest to do that. The county's best interest, so.
I agree with that. All right.
And I understand your concern as well.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate all of you entertaining my questions and my exploration
We
of this.
appreciate your asking.
So let me ask you a question, Alice. As the sphere of influence of Auburn, have you considered annexing? Sorry, but grab control. This airport has been a concern for you for a very long time. Is there any consideration? I know Auburn is reluctant to grow, but
No, we're not reluctant to grow, believe me. But that is for a whole nother conversation than one before us today. But what we, I'll just suffice to say that the city is undergoing its general plan amendment process, and included in that process will be discussions of annexation. Where and when is all to be determined, but yeah.
Do you have a comment or you're just in agreement?
Jonathan Wright, Community Economic Development Director, City of Auburn. In agreement, there are specific rules with island annexations, though, that prevent us from doing that. I think, the intent was when we established our general plan and create our sphere of influence, that yes, we would be doing exactly that. We're just several decades behind and just now getting on board with our general plan update, which will include annexation, which will include growth for the city. And eventually it would be ideal for us to have control around our airport too. So.
thank you.
Right. Anything else, Paul?
No, I appreciate the time.
I just wanted to clarify something, and I'm not even sure I can articulate my exact question. So you, Supervisor Jones, said that if we make a stipulation saying no building in C1, that they will rezone it anyways, and they'll make it more regardless of safety, or did you say that they will take the safety in consideration and they will not do that, and they can use that as like parks and parking spaces, et cetera?
You could absolutely condition this as such.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you. I just wanted clarification on that.
But it will be rezoned. It'll be automatically rezoned once that list goes to the state. Now, the additional uses that you're talking about, I don't remember discussing those at the board meeting, but if that's the case, then you have something to work with, even in the rezoned parcel.
That brings up, I guess, another question. If the state can come in and rezone, liability shifts to them, yeah? If they're going outside of our compatibility plan and changing the zoning. Well, I understand, but for instance, if the city of Lincoln has a project they want to do that is outside the compatibility plan, and the Airport Land Use Commission says, yeah, no, we can still go ahead and do that, but all liability shifts to us. So I'm wondering if it doesn't flip the other way around, and if the state comes in.
You're looking to me. I'm sorry. I don't know, when the state does the rezone, you still are going to have your airport compatibility and your airport land use plan. And I'm hearing you discuss, conditioning that property for compatibility. So I don't think the HCD state zoning trumps the airport land use
That's what I wanted to.
plan. I don't know without looking at it further. And my assumption is the airport land use plan and that compatibility requirement will still apply because you still have an airport there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to provide one more point of clarification. The state is not rezoning these sites. The county is rezoning these sites. The state community development division certifies the housing element. Our housing element is being amended to address the sites that were not included in the adopted program, as well as to adjust the switch from an overlay, as was identified in the housing element, to a straight rezone. Projects still have to comply with a number of other regulations. So this zoning simply enables the density to be higher. The proposed RM30 ordinance has been included with staff reports since November. That shows all of the permissible uses. And if there are other site-specific considerations that need to be made, they would be made at the time that a development application is received by the county. I just wanted to make that clarification. It's not the state that is rezoning, it is the county under its land use authority. Thank you.
Thank you.
That begs one more question.
No, I'm
Kelly-
turning off the mics. No, that's
This is just a quick one. So Kelly, at what point will the state come back and bless our list that we sent to them? And then will the rezoning occur? What will happen? When will the rezoning happen? How will it happen?
So we are working on getting our housing element amended. That amendment is then posted to the county's website for a 7-day public review period. And then the state has a 60-day review period. So we're cutting it very close, but we will get feedback from HCD on the amendment prior to when we are targeting our May 7th Board of Supervisors date for final action. So we are targeting May 7th as the board date where we would be seeking a final action on the rezone from the board. So at that point, when the board takes their action, that is effectively when the sites would be rezoned.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, thank you. Very interesting conversation. And I mean, my personal opinion is that a lot of what we're hearing about is land use policy, and we're not a land use policy organization. Placer County is, City of Auburn is. It seems like that's where this dialogue belongs, is with the Board of Supervisors and the City of Auburn. I'm just looking at our job as, what does the airport land use compatibility plan say, and what's being proposed, and are they consistent? And while the Q&A was going on, I looked up the airport land use compatibility plan, and for myself, I know David has gone through this effort, but it's very clear that in zone C2 that multifamily development is deemed compatible. And that's, with the exception of that small portion of site 43, all these sites are proposed as multifamily development, and they're in zone C2. So it seems like a very straightforward question to me. And I just think that a lot of the dialogue that's occurring here is again, better left with the Board of Supervisors as opposed to ourselves. So that's it.
Great. Any other comments from board members? Okay, then it's my turn, and thank you, Dan. You just took my notes. So, so basically a few things. I served for 2 years on the Rockland committee that went through our arena numbers. So I've been through these discussions and listening to all this. I understand. I get it. I understand concerns about the type of development. I understand the comments regarding a willing property owner and the things they would like to do, but I also understand what we're charged with. And what we're being asked to do is we have a proposal in front of us to determine if it is compatible with the ALUCP, as Dan very eloquently outlined for us. While each and every one of us has an opinion clearly based on the comments that have been made relative to whether it's 2 or whether it's 13, the issue before us is, again, consistency with the ALUCP. I also want to address, unfortunately, the ability to bifurcate is not before us. We're being asked we would have to either do the 13 or the 2. So we would have to propose modifying that. So you would have to vote no. And Deanne, if you want to jump in, I could not see how we could bifurcate, because she would like to vote for the 2, to support the 2, but not the 13. So if the motion were to support the 13, it would be that motion that we have one item in front of us. So if the board were to make that, I think what Alice would like to do is she'd like to say, I'm supporting the 2, and you could certainly make that part of the.
I would actually just make a motion to support the 2 sites with the conditions included in the report, and the condition with regards to no residential on C1, and see where that motion and to see where that went. And if it was not the desire of this body to approve that motion or even second it, then it's not before us.
Okay.
But I can kind of count, and I think that there is support for all 13. So I would just respectfully like to make my motion. And if it goes down, it goes down. But then I can at least express my support for those two sites. So that's, Mr. Chairman, what I would like to do.
Okay, so completely different than bifurcating
yes,
it.
yeah.
It's more of it was just more
It's a bifurcated
clarifying.
motion. I get
You want to,
yeah.
you want to position, you want to propose a motion that
Yes.
would be different than what is before us.
Yes,
And we are going to have that regardless, because as I can count. I know some of you may question that, but I can count and I get the sense that we do have support for what is proposed, subject to also including a condition regarding site 41 or 43,
43.
sorry,
On
43.
C1.
So, relative to this C1. So, with that though, I will certainly provide you with the opportunity. I believe all the comments have been made to put that motion forward.
thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the patience of this board as well. And I recognize this is a technical exercise, but I need to still vote my conscience on this. So I would like to move that we find consistency as recommended by staff for sites 43 and 51 with the conditions stipulated in the recommendations, and that no residential be developed in C1. That's my motion.
I'll second your motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Quick question. If this motion were to pass, then someone else wanted to make a subsequent motion to approve the other 11 sites, is that procedurally, does that work?
Do that, yeah.
One has to be.
They're not,
Today.
what's
I
that?
think it would matter if the first motion was only the sites and not find consistency with the other 11 sites, which I think is what the intent of the motion is, then that would preclude. If it's open, then, it's open to that, to what the first and the second motion would be. So,
So
yeah.
if there was a second motion, a substitute motion, or wouldn't that take precedence that we'd have to vote on this substitute
Yeah,
motion?
And I think that's a different question. If there's a substitute motion,
Ah.
I think we had different different questions for us.
So
Yeah.
sorry for dragging this out. What I heard in Alice's motion was to find those two sites consistent. I didn't hear in the motion to find the other 11 sites inconsistent.
The intent is that they're not consistent, because I'm not finding that they
Okay.
are.
Okay.
And so I mean, we'll just see where the votes are.
Okay.
I with all due respect, I see the writing on the wall.
Call for the question.
Okay, so any further discussion? There being none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
No.
Cortez,
Aye.
that was a yes. Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Holmes,
No.
Joyner,
No.
Jones,
Aye.
Wilkins,
No.
motion does not pass.
And I want to thank the board for the discussion relative to this item and your willingness to talk through and work through this. So given that this did not pass, and I know there's consideration for the current item that is before us as presented, with, of course, subject to a potential modification relative to.
To C1, yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion that we find the proposed Placer County housing element rezone project is consistent with the Placer County Airport land use compatibility plan, subject to the recommended conditions.
And
And what?
we.
No residential on
residential
C1.
on-
No residential on
Defer to your
this in the C1 zone.
I think.
All right.
On C1 within site 43.
43. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Appreciate you jumping in, David. All right, so with that, we have a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, Sully, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
Yes.
Cortez,
I'm gonna go ahead and say, yeah, it's gonna go through anyway, so yes.
Dowden Calvillo,
No.
Holmes,
Yes.
Joyner,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Wilkins,
Yes.
motion passes.
To the representatives from both the county and from the city of Auburn, thank you for your time your involvement, your engagement. I do believe for Auburn, there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for continued discussion and engagement with all of the involved individuals to look at what is approved and what moves forward. So, but thank you all for your time and for the board. All right, with that, I appreciate everyone's time again. The next item we have is our item R, which is the Executive Director's Report.
Chair, I'll yield my time in the interest of it. Just quickly, Director Joyner and I were part of the CalCog Regional Forum down in Monterey a couple of weeks ago. We presented out our equity policy to that statewide group. It was widely received and appreciated. We've already discussed CARTA. We did have the first board meeting on the 15th, and they will be looking to move forward with a tolling program manager, and we'll look to support them in those efforts. We had a great meeting with Caltrans and their District 3 leadership on the 13th and all the member jurisdictions. It was just a really good spirited, open conversations with Caltrans. It's interesting to see as they're moving forward with a new level of leadership, how they're changing. And I think we're going to have a really productive relationship moving forward. And I've already mentioned cap to cap. So with that, I'll close. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matt. Board direction to staff. Do we have any direction from the board for staff?
Just have a nice rest of the day.
We're not done yet. All right, but thank you. All right, next item, sorry, is item T, and that is informational items. Those items were provided in our packet today. And then we have item U, which is our adjournment to closed session. We have two items on our closed session today. The first is closed session pursuant to Government Code 54957, Public Employee Performance Evaluation, Executive Director. And item 2, closed session pursuant to Government Code 54957.6, conference with labor negotiator, agency designated representative, agency chair, unrepresented employee, executive director. Do we have anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this item before we move into closed session? Anyone in chambers? Do we have anyone online that wishes to comment? All right, we are moving to closed session. Yes. Great, thank you. All right. The board has returned from closed session. There is nothing to report out. We will move to item V, and that is our open session, which is a review of the Executive Director Employment Agreement Amendment. And with that, I am going to make a recommendation to the board to approve an amendment to Executive Director Matt Click's employment agreement to amend his annual salary to $284,115 to provide benefits in addition to his existing current employee benefits, to include deferred compensation contributions of $250 a pay period, administrative leave of 120 hours a year, and to extend the term of the agreement through December 31st, 2028. So, any comments from the board? Any questions?
Is that the motion?
No, I will need a motion in a second, and I'm going to open it up to the public for comment. But if there's any questions from the board, and I will bring it back also for comments, I think some of you may have comments as well. But if there are no questions, I'll open it up to the public for comment. Okay, all right. Is there anyone from the public in chambers who wishes to comment on this item? There being none, do we have anyone online?
No.
No, I will bring it back to the board for any comments before we move to a motion. Any comments from the board?
A real simple comment. I think it's obvious that we are extremely pleased with the work that you're doing and the changes that you've made within the organization. And we hope this action reflects that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
thank you very much. You know, you've hit the ground running, and we're very impressed with all that you've had to accomplish, all that you have accomplished thus far, and we look forward to even more great accomplishments in the future. So thank you very much.
I have to say, you've been in the fast lane ever since you hit the ground, so I appreciate
It's
it.
the HOV lane.
Yeah, oh Lord. Yeah, thank you, Matt.
All right, anyone else?
It's been amazing too, this committee and everything you've done outside even and your mentorship, but you know, cap to cap and things like that. We really do appreciate you. So I would like, with that, I'd
Okay,
like
well,
to.
wait, if you could, just let me real quick.
I can still make a motion.
Can I make a comment though?
You
before
can comment
do
after.
that? Okay, just wanted to say in
We have a comment.
alignment with our board, Matt, appreciate all your hard work, the direction you're taking us, even your answering my errant phone calls while you're out on the golf course. It's much appreciated. It was on the weekend and he still answered me. But again, I think you hear from the direction the board has provided that your work is recognized, as is the work of the team. And we thank you for that and look forward to working with you as we move through 2024 and beyond. So
We
with
have one
that,
more comment over here.
oh, we do. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So with that, I make a motion to approve.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Broadway,
Yes.
Cortez,
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Wonderful, thank you. With that, we are, our next meeting will be on March 27th, 2024. Is it March 27th? Is that correct? Okay, just want to confirm that. I think someone had said,
22nd.
yes, 22nd earlier, so I wanted to confirm. So it is the 27th, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
And I will not be here on March 27th.
You will not, okay.
I will be in Paris.
Okay.